Hey, my name is Max. I'm from London, and one night when I was about 14, 15 years old, I was in the car with my dad and my sister. We were on the way home from visiting my auntie in the hospital, and we were having some argument in the car. There was tears, tensions were high, and we were the only car on the highway, and middle of the night, and we approached what I can only describe as a triangular craft in the sky. There was one big light in the middle, and then one light on each point of the triangle. It was just stationary, sat there, very, very low, to the point where if I was standing on the street and had a golf ball, I think I could have hit it if I threw it. We were approaching it, went to drive underneath. Everybody in the car shut up. We all saw it at the same time. I said to my dad, "Did you see that?" And he just didn't respond. I tried to ask about him since, but he doesn't talk about it, and, it's stuck with me ever since.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, today is a very, very, very special episode that I've been looking forward for a long time. It's a long time overdue. I'm joined today by my friend Hakim Isler. First of all, welcome, Hakim. Thank you for making it out here.
Thanks. I appreciate it. We've been trying to do this for a super long time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's worked out.
Yeah.
It's worked out to now. So I'll give you guys a quick intro on Hakim. For those of you not familiar with his work, this guy is a polymath. He studied 25 years of ninjutsu. He was part of the PSYOP for the military for several years. He is a trained remote viewer under some of the best remote viewers that the government had to offer, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And he is also, you also do mind sight stuff. And
Diamond ring.
Yes, it is.
We'll get into all of that. You're into herbs and you're into remedies. He's into survival. He was on, 2 seasons of Naked and Afraid?
Yeah, 2 different, yeah.
And to top it all off, like that wasn't enough, he is also putting together the very first edition of the Psi Games.
Yeah.
Folks, get ready for this. This is basically the Psychic Olympics. There's going to be teams and individuals competing in different categories to find out who the most psychic person or people are. This is taking place when's this taking place again? Is this July?
It's August 1st through
August
3rd
1st,
in Charlottesville, Virginia.
So if you guys want to check that out, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I want to get into some other things before we do. But I wanted to drop that at the top because if you guys want more information, there's a link below. And if you sign up, you get 20% off. And I'm going to be there. I'm going to be speaking as well. So if you want to come say hi, that's a good place to meet me as well. We'll get into that in a second because that's very exciting.
It is.
Groundbreaking.
It is. It's super amazing. So I'm really pumped about it and to see how it's taking shape and how many people are getting involved. It's birthing itself in a way. And so, from download to me saying, okay, I'm going to take this on and try it, to now it's just snowballing. It's
amazing.
Bigger and bigger and bigger.
Your private information is probably being sold this very moment. Don't believe me? Well, you're probably being flooded with spam, emails, and calls and texts. And if you're like me, you don't want people knowing where you live or what your financial situation is or what your political views are. And these companies can leverage all of that information. They can even use that information against you to raise your insurance premiums, and that has happened. You can actually demand that your name be taken off of these lists. Now, the bad news is that there are hundreds of lists, and it's incredibly time-consuming. You can put a stop to that, and it brings me to today's sponsor, Incogni. So with Incogni, basically you sign up, you grant them permission to act on your behalf, and sit back and watch them do what they do. They contact all of these spamming websites and demand that your name be taken off these lists. And if the people refuse, guess what? Incogni keeps demanding until your name is completely gone from all of these nefarious lists on the internet. You've even got a really cool dashboard where it shows you the progress on what's being done, what's in the process of being done, what's already been done. So go to incogni.com/area52 or click the link below and use promo code area52 to save 60% off your annual plan and watch them defend your privacy month after month. All right, we'll get there in a second. First, I want to cover some ground, all right? Because the one term that you hear probably the most, all right, and I had to bring on a real PSYOP expert here to clarify this because PSYOP is thrown around so loosely,
Yeah.
especially in the UFO community.
Yeah.
It's PSYOP and grifter and all these other, but PSYOP is a specific one.
Yeah.
And so I had to clear the air for all you thinking I'm a PSYOP here. Well, I might be, but he's gonna be able to tell you.
I love that you're saying PSYOP and not PSYOPs. You know, I got smoked when I was, well, we call it smoke when they make you do push-ups and sit-ups in the Army if you say something or do something wrong, and a way of corrective action. And it comes from when you start to be outside and it's cooler and you get hot and the steam comes off of you, you're being smoked, right?
Wow.
And so we would say, as newbies, we'd say PSYOPs, you know, and they were like, there's no S. There's no PSYOPs, like, because we're thinking operations.
Sure.
You know? No, it's just PSYOP. It's just PSYOP. And that's one of the pet peeves that I have when I talk to people.
It's like
so
Lego.
You don't have it. Yeah, exactly. There's no Legos.
Yeah, I say Legos all the it triggers all the Lego nerds. So the PSYOP nerds out there are very happy with me.
Yeah.
Tell us exactly. Let's start first of all how you got into this program, and then we'll get into maybe what exactly you did with this program.
Yeah. So I was looking to join the Army. I was training in ninjutsu and this martial arts, and my teacher had a bodyguard seminar. And, you know, he was talking about, hey, I used to protect the Dalai Lama. And that was a very specific way you got to be a bodyguard for the Dalai Lama, right? You can't just be like a rap star bodyguard where somebody does something wrong and you just drop them on their head. Like, this is the Dalai Lama, you know? So I was really interested in that. So I went to the seminar, and there was this guy there named Michael Brewer, and he's like a super awesome guy. And I was telling him I was going into the service because I really had some skills and I wanted to use those skills to help my country because it was after 9/11. And I was like, I want to go into the 18 X-ray program, which is like the special forces. You enter knowing that that's what you're going to be, and you go through a pipeline and so on and so forth. And he was like, you know, you should really, with this ninja background that we have and so on, the thing you should do is PSYOP, and that's what I do. And I said, well, what's that? And he was like, oh, it's like psychological operations, like psychological warfare. And I was like, huh. And I didn't know that was a thing. He was like, yeah, you know, like the ninja, that's what we did back in the day. And like, you should try it out. And so I was like, okay, let's do it. And he was like, in this way, if you get hurt trying to go through the Special Forces program, then you go back to PSYOP. And you'll be hand in hand with them. You'll go through a lot of the same training, and you'll know all of the same people and that good old boy network. You'll start to build those relationships. And so then if you don't make it, if you decide you want to go over there and you don't make it, you're still right there with them. You're just in a different capacity. And I was like, yeah, that's a better strategy. And this sounds really cool. And the more I dug into it, the more I was like, no, this is really where I need to be. You know, I'm cerebral, and I like to see the depth and how things work and how people's minds are working around specific topics. And, you know, and that's really what I was passionate about. And having that ninja background and that ninja connection, and the ninja being masters of psychological warfare, I was like, this would be great for me to transition into. And that's how it started. So
you got, you were already prepped.
Yes.
Going into that, like you kind of, this kind of like fell into your lap a little bit because of what, you know, we talked off camera. We'll get into that a lot, but there are so many links between your ninja training,
yes,
PSYOP, and I found even with magic, there's like, there's so many. And so you kind of were prepared for this.
Yeah. It
happens now, you're getting trained.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that entails? What's PSYOP training?
Yeah, so I think that's really it's some, and we had this drill sergeant, which is, he was a very unique guy. And so I straight to say, I don't know if everybody got the same experience as we had, but he really wanted to, there's two of them actually. They wanted us to experience what it was like to really use sound and manipulation and sleep deprivation and all those things to your power, so you can control or manipulate or influence different audiences and individuals. And so during my training, we would have just off the wall stuff. Like, this one drill sergeant that I'm talking about. So you go to regular basic training, and then you get done with that, and you go to like your advanced individual training, which is AIT, which is going to be where you focus on just what you're doing, because everybody's a soldier first, right? So you go through that basic training. Here's how you shoot a gun. Here's how you do unit tactics, stuff like that. And I did that at Fort Benning. And then I went to AIT, and then you're like, okay, well, now here's what you specifically are going to do as your specialty. And that was where the PSYOP training took place. And so we have our school day where you actually go to school and learn like what is PSYOP and how do you do it and what are the different words that you use and all that stuff. And then we had this drill sergeant, and this guy would like just manipulate and play with us all the time. So times when we thought we had to be done were times that we weren't done. And so, for instance, we get done after our long day, we do PT in the morning, come back, rush, try to scarf something down, then go to the schoolhouse. Then you're sitting in school learning all this stuff all day. And then you're like, okay, we get back and we should be able to go to sleep so that we could be fresh for the next day. And then we get back and he'd be like, okay, we want you guys to go up and make a map of all your rooms and where everything is. Okay, we go up and do that, thinking they just need to know, and then we bring it back down. Okay, cool. We want it to look like this out here on the lawn. So go and get all your shit and bring it out here and set it up this way on the lawn. It's like at 6 p.m., right? So we're all like, what?
Discouraged.
Yeah, discouraged. And so now you got all of us like going up, to our rooms, and, we do it. We do our AIT in tandem with civil affairs, right? So it was civil affairs guys and PSYOP guys there. So then we're like pulling all our stuff down and we're setting it up and we're looking at the map and we're doing all of this. And it's like now almost 11 o'clock, right? And so now it's 11 o'clock and you're like, oh man. And they're like, yeah, you guys are going to sleep outside. You're going to sleep outside. We don't care if it rains tonight. So now you're trying to deal with that psychologically. And then at 11, you get done and they're like, all right, move all your shit back inside. So
really mind games.
Yeah. So then you spend all this time like trying to, do it. And then you get all your stuff back inside, and then they go into a room, close the door, and then they'll move shit around, and then they'll come back in the room and have you come back in and be like, what's this? This doesn't look like your what you drew in your map here,
Wow.
your strip map. And you're like, this is not how I left the room. And they're like, shut up, everybody get outside. We're going to smoke you guys because, Isler didn't have his stuff ready,
No.
And so now we're all outside, and then everybody's mad at me or whoever, because they didn't get it right. But really, it was just part of the thing. They went into your room, rearranged it, came out and yelled at you because it's not right.
Right.
And in your mind, but then also maybe you don't because you're so tired. So you're like, did I do something wrong? And because you don't know what they did. You just know they're saying that it's not right. And you're out here and you smoked, and now it's all this resentment going on. And then you get back in at like 2 a.m. and they're like, all right, well, go ahead and get some rest because we got a PT test in the morning. We're going to do physical training, and if you don't make it, on your 2-mile run in this time or whatever, we're going to kick you out of here. So now you can't sleep. So you're like sitting in bed like, oh no, if I don't pass this test, everything is for nothing. I get kicked out of here.
Damn.
And then you wake up and, or if you can't fall asleep, you wake up, you go outside, and then they're like, all right, just do your normal PT and get ready for class. And you're like, what? And they're like, yeah, there's no PT today, no PT
just
test.
To mess with you.
It's just messing with you. And you really start to recognize really quickly how things break down, how people break down, how creating all this discourse in people's mind and their routines really, or giving them hope like, oh yeah, when you get home tonight, we're not going to mess with you. We're going to give you as much sleep as possible because we messed with you last night. And then you get back and they mess with you. And then you're like, whoa. Or they're like, we're going to mess with you when you get back. And then when you get back and they don't mess with you.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know what's reality and what's not reality here.
That is, all to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? That seems like what it is. So what's interesting is that, my father did PSYOP as well for the Canadian military. And, I remember my upbringing, and there's a lot of what you're saying that goes into...
He was preparing you.
Dude, I'll tell you after the podcast, but it's like, a lot of similarities of the psychological warfare. Very, very interesting because What do you think is the purpose of that, though? Is it just to prepare you for those situations, or is it to break you? Like, what do you think is the
It's
goal?
stress inoculation, right? So getting a person to understand what it's like to be that level of discomfort, and then to understand how to be able to push through that and work with that. And that's very challenging. And people don't get that. And I remember going to my ninja training, talking to my ninja teacher. He would always say this thing: everybody wants to be a ninja, but nobody wants to do ninja shit or be a, he didn't say shit because he's a Buddhist monk, but nobody wants to really put in that ninja effort. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, if you're talking about being a ninja, you're talking about a person who understands how people's psychology work and how to work that psychology to your advantage. And so how do you learn that? You have to actually, for most people have to go through it. And that's tough. And so that means that master teachers of this would do stuff like, oh yeah, Chris, he sucks. I don't want him around. A matter of fact, you guys should beat him up. We don't want him here anymore. Then everybody's like, the teacher told us to beat you up and do all this stuff. And you're like, but I trust my teacher. Why would he do that? And then like you come back and you're like, teacher, they told me that you said to beat me up. And he's like, no, I didn't tell him that, like you're my favorite. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I told everybody that you were my favorite and not to touch you. And then you look at them and you're like, well, why did they beat me up? And, and then like later it comes out that that was all part. It's all a part of you understanding how that feels and how to recreate that for other people. And the best way to do that is to have you go through it. So that you can know on some level what that feeling is. And those that are the best in PSYOP, they hold on to that and they know how to recreate that really well.
So it's not necessarily giving you an immunity to it.
No.
From what I understand, there is no immunity.
Unless you're, in my opinion, unless you're a psycho, where you're just like completely disconnected from emotion and life, and you just want to live alone as a hermit. Those are people out there, right? But they're very unique individuals. Like, that's not everybody, The majority of us want to have connections and social connections and be with people, and
we have triggers,
and we have triggers and we have hooks, right? And so, but there's so many people out there that who, not so many, but a small majority out there or minority out there that don't actually follow those rules. And they're kind of interesting individuals. And normally you can pick them out, because they just don't kind of fit in well. And there's some who pretend. There are psychopaths out there, murderers out there who pretend to be like what you expect them to see, like in the show Dexter. I'm not sure if you ever saw that.
Yeah, of course.
But like his whole life was about like trying to pretend to be normal, even though he wasn't. But when you are just a real normal person and you go into one of these things, then you start realizing that you're not immune neither. We all have a hook. And if you use that and understand that, then that actually makes you a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit stronger, because it's the ones who believe that they know and that they own everything about themselves that are the easiest to fool.
Shoo. That's a big blow to the ego for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people are like, not me. You hear it all the time. You see it all the time. They're like, impossible that I'm being PSYOP.
Yeah.
Because
I know and I have the information and I studied the trusted sources and those are the easiest people to fool.
Yeah, that's why I even asked Lou, like Lou Elizondo, I was like, is there a potential that you might be being used by like government agencies for like their own agenda? And he goes, it's possible. He's like, I know a lot of the tricks and there hasn't been one sign. Like usually like there's like a telltale like something. He's like, I haven't seen anything. But again, even he admits possible, right?
Yeah.
They're that good, huh?
Yeah. And this has been going on for a long time. So again, tying back to my ninja stuff, sometimes a group or a clan, because everybody signs on, if you're going to be a ninja going out there, that your life could be on the line and that you may not make it back, right? So with that understanding and these groups not being tied to the way we normally see things, they kind of operate from this scheme of totality. So like things are happening the way they should happen. And that's kind of tough for people to get. they would send people off on these missions with false information and then feed the enemy information so that they can get captured. So now you got this agent out there that gets captured that has certain information. They will resist because they think their information is true and real. And then when they finally crack and give that information, it was all false information to begin with.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying? And I read that in the book, Misinformation, or it's either Disinformation or Misinformation. It's a book that came from a guy who was KGB and like defected. And he was saying how they would often set up whole companies, like shell fake companies with people, real people in them who actually had real jobs, who thought they were doing real things, but all of that was part of the PSYOP. It was all part of the scam. So if someone infiltrated that place and got information from, let's say, you're telling a story that you truly believe
I'm not
is
lying.
real. You're not lying. But that story and that job and everything about it was all set up as a diversionary tactic for a really good, counter spy program or another spy program from another country,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
And we can't do that in our average day, everyday society. We can't deal with that type of depth and breadth of like manipulation and illusion. Right?
You don't have time.
You don't have time, and you don't want to, and your brain's just like, we need it easy. We need it packaged. And as a magician, you know that very well. It's like they don't want to think how the depths of how these organizations would go to create the illusion, And so just like sometimes you look at a magician, or if you find out about like how they do certain tricks, you're like, nobody would go that far. And you're like, but all of the magicians behind the scenes are like, yeah, we do go that far.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go that far for the trick, like Houdini, this guy's like locking himself up and, upside down in water stuff. And, and people are like, no way, it has to be real. It has to be magic. Nobody would actually go through these depths to make it so. And you told me a story about the handcuff thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Houdini is really interesting because like his skill wasn't being a magician. According to other magicians, he was pretty much a shit magician. He wasn't a great magician. He gets that rap because he was the most famous magician, but he was actually a fantastic escape artist. And even better than being an escape artist, he was a good marketer. And he had a whole, I went to Copperfield's museum and he showed me, he has basically his whole library. He also has his filing cabinet, Houdini's actual filing cabinet. There's a whole giant section that's just marketing schemes.
Yeah.
And it's labeled as such. And it's filled with the different lengths that Houdini would go through to draw a crowd. And he has some of these most amazing escapes where there's 100,000 people watching him escape from a straitjacket, like suspended, right? And so like he would, for instance, go to like the best handcuff place and be like, you guys need to tweak this, this, and this to make it, even better. That would be, and they're like, all right. And they do that. And then he'd have them bring it to like the police station and be like, these are the best handcuffs in the world. No one will get out of these, right?
Yeah.
And it just so happens Houdini would come into town and be like, I will break out of any handcuffs here. If anyone has handcuffs, I will break out of them without issue.
Yeah.
And the cops were like, yeah, you think you'll break out of these? These are the best. And we have a certificate. And he's like, all right. And little did they know that he had made those tweaks so that he can pick the locks easier or find a way out or finagle his way out of these cuffs. And, so he would say, fine, you choose the cuffs, you choose the place. And he would do that. And so magicians often do that too. They go through great, great lengths. And that's why I find this common bond between what you're saying.
Yeah. And
I find it so fascinating because you are playing with people's psychology a lot. Like that's the whole thing, psychological operations.
Yeah.
So you're a bit of a magician yourself here.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Abracadabra.
Okay. So can you give us a practical example? And this doesn't have to be something you've done. It can be, but let's just say for argument's sake, just something that you would do, let's say to Red Team to make something happen. Can you give us some type of scenario where PSYOPs would be very useful and how you would?
Well, I think one hot topic today, which I think we could talk about is like, and I always see things come out in the news and I start brainstorming, like if my commander came in and said, hey, this is what we need people to believe or think, how I would do that, And one of the topics is the UAPs that are the drones, UAP, whatever you want to call it, that are flying all over the place. And there are these installations. And, you know, one way I was thinking about that is if I did not know and did not have control over what was actually happening, but I didn't want mass panic, or I wanted to kind of control the narrative, then I would put up as many flying weird drones as possible, so that the average person who doesn't want to believe will look at that and say, oh, that's just a drone. Even though they know it's like super weird and odd, you know, they're just going to go with their own bias and say, no, that can't be. That they did say on the news that it was all these things. And that would be like a good little PSYOP, which is like, okay, there are things flying. We don't know what they are, but we don't want the average person to know that we don't know. So we're going to say that they're just these things that we can all relate to. And then for those who might have a different opinion, we're going to toss another thing out there and we're going to say plasmoids.
Right.
So it's either a drone or a plasmoid. But the plasmoid has a scientific foundation. The drone has a scientific foundation. It all screams that we understand you know, what's happening or what it is, maybe not where it's coming from, but we all understand what's happening. So it doesn't give people this feeling of insecurity, like we literally can't control our skies and we don't know how to deal with these things that are up there. And there's still that debate there, but if you really look at it, it's new information coming out all the time, and the information that's coming out is changing. Some people are saying mothership, some people are saying this, and it's keeping you from landing on any one thing because everybody's kind of like, this is what I think, and I have people who told me this is the truth, and this is what I think. So it leaves you kind of confused, and as long as you're confused, you're not on anybody's side, and you can't really take a stand, right?
Interesting. Whoa.
So I keep you stuck in the illusion long enough for us to get through it.
Yeah.
So that you can't really land on anything, because once you land on something and you can then take a stand and say, hey, I want to know more about this because this is what I understand. This is a unidentified, anomalous, object in the sky, and I want to know what it is. You have said that it's something that we can't discern, that's doing things that we don't understand. And if you say that, then now all of us are going to band together and demand more answers.
Right.
But if you're like, it could be a drone, and then some of them are plasmoids, and then some of them this, it makes it a lot harder.
Keeping them suspended in confusion is an actual tactic.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
You can't unify if you're in confusion.
Yeah, and you can also, I suppose you can just disseminate false info through the ranks as well in that case, and be like, here, we'll tell the police, we'll do this for the police, or we'll do this to CIA, or we'll do this to the FBI. And now the answers are conflicting, and it's up for debate still. Meanwhile, they're fixing whatever's happening.
Yeah.
What do you think is the move? Because I've speculated that much as well, that that's what's going on. They're covering something with more things, right? They're just in magic, we have an expression: the larger motion hides the smaller motion. So if I were to do like if I were to do this and just vanish the pen, that's a small motion.
Yeah.
Your eyes are kind of like on my hands, but if I go now there's like more, the bigger motion hides the smaller motion.
Yeah.
And that happens too. So if you got like specific drones going around, well, let's get more drones. And now it's like, now the misdirect is happening. Where do we land once the drone situation is resolved? How do they, the people who are, doing all the activity, how do they break that to people?
So you mean now that it's over and off the news and...
Yeah, like what do they say? Like how do they resolve it? Like obviously on the news they said, oh, it's just FAA, whatever, but it's still going on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once they really figure out what's been going on, how do they tell us everything's okay now? Do they go, oh, it was just an exercise? Or do they like, where's your head there? What do you think they...
I think that saying that it's an exercise is one way, which is kind of, to some degree, that's coming out. And it really depends on what was the purpose and what is the outcome. So whatever they figure out is the truth, then where you're going to go from there depends on how you want people to perceive that truth or an untruth. You get what I'm saying? Like if it is an actual UAP, right, then it's like we still don't want people to know that. So
That's right, yeah.
we have to say that it was a training exercise. Maybe people will get with that, or we have to say that it was us running some special mission, secret mission, where it gives me an out because it's like, oh, that's why we couldn't tell you because it was a secret mission. Sorry about that, but this was for national security,
Yeah.
So, and then, most of us patriots would be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
They did what they had to do.
Yeah. They did what they had to do. And it did make us uncomfortable, but we understand that,
It's for the greater good.
It's for the greater good. Yeah. So we'll explain it away. And then we'll also explain it away to our friends, because we want to be right. And we want to know that our version of the way the story turns out and what we agree with is right. So we'll pass that. We'll perpetuate that cycle.
Yeah. Personal. That's that hook again.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that in a second because that's really interesting. And that's like, I feel like that's the baseline of PSYOP is that hook.
Yeah.
When you see somebody like Jake Barber or Lou Elizondo or any of these guys, muggles, us here, we're watching this stuff and we're commenting PSYOP or like this is does that ever go through your mind as well, or is there ever a point where you rule out the PSYOP completely?
I never rule it out me personally, because I've seen people on mass scales and I've been a part of people on mass scales. Like, perfect example. There is nothing more trippy than for you. I was tactical PSYOP. So we only worked in teams of 3 with one local national or foreign national that will work with us to kind of help us understand culture. And that, because sometimes we may think it's okay to put this on a flyer, but that actually means like, to hell with your mom,
Right.
So that person will help us understand the culture and how that culture operates a little bit deeper, who lives there. So we worked in these very small teams. There's nothing more trippy than to see something that you and a team of, you're a team of 3, so 2 other people, and this one other person, dreamt up as to how to manipulate and what you want the people to say and what you want the people to do, and then start communicating with people in that environment, in that group or that tribe or in that culture, and they start saying back to you things that you wrote that you wanted them to say on a board, but they're saying it like it's their discovery, like it's their truth now. Nothing will blow your mind more and make you feel like you are also programmed. You're like, whoa, what the hell am I saying then? What am I doing? Did somebody also write that on the board somewhere and say, this is what we want Hakim and people like Hakim to say? And it's nothing more trippy. It's like, it's like you're in a dream.
It's a magic trick.
It's a magic trick. Yes, exactly. You're like looking at somebody and you want them to believe that it's magic and that it was like it came out of the ether and you got these wizard abilities, but really you're like, that's what I wanted you to believe, but I actually just did this thing. And that's overwhelming. And if let me own it. So me coming back and having aspects of PTSD, right? One of the biggest was that I didn't trust anything. Every freaking thing in my world was an illusion. I had been behind the curtain, brother. I was the Wizard of Oz, me and my crew, So I'm pulling the strings and making people think the wizard, oh, he's got these magic powers and stuff like that. And then you see behind the curtain, if you are awakened and cerebral, some people can disassociate from that. But once I started having this deeper understanding, it started really getting to me. I was just like, man, I'm in Oz, I'm in Oz. I'm a part of Oz. I'm helping perpetuate Oz. It's crazy. It's like, profound, you know?
I expect there's like a certain level of guilt there as well that comes along with that. And that's
It's a whole lot
part of the
guilt,
post-traumatic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I started, I went out and I started doing talks, and I've been working on this book called Pinocchio's Liberation, this idea of this, doll that's controlled being liberated, through understanding and knowledge about what is happening in the world, and how those strings are all on all of us, but it's recognizing that this string is pulling me this way and saying, oh, nope, I don't want to go that way. I don't want to go that way. That's this attention, this attentiveness to my feelings and my emotions, stuff that you would get through deep meditation and deep self-reflection, to pull away from that and say, okay, well, maybe I'm being led down this path. And I want to be an active participant in understanding whether or not I want to go down that way, or I'm going to go another way, versus just going down that way like a zombie and not realizing it.
Yeah. So to a certain extent, you are kind of immune, and not immune in the sense like it'll never happen, but being aware of it definitely helps if you are also aware that you can be affected.
Yes.
Because it doesn't help if you think you're immune.
Yes.
Right? You can be aware of it, but if you think you're immune to it, then being aware of it doesn't help you.
Yes.
But if you're aware of it and know that you're susceptible to it, then you can put yourself into that mind state of someone who would be susceptible and kind of like help you navigate out of it. That's really interesting. And I think that, because I'm hearing you talk, man, and I'm like, this is exactly like talking to a magician. Like, we're saying the same things here. And,
I am a magician.
Yeah, we're saying the same things. And the difference is that magicians, well, for the most part, I won't say all of them, but we do walk an ethical line when it comes to that stuff, because I know for a fact that I can convince people that I have psychic ability. I can do that. I've done it, in the past when learning magic. And you get this high off of like controlling the situation, controlling people's perception about you, about life, about their own reality. It becomes like, you're like, whoa, and that's a dangerous thing. A lot of responsibility there. And, it took me a few years to really understand that, and that is a very slippery slope, and in the wrong hands can be weaponized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the things when we went through PSYOP school that I took very personal, is it was like, don't use this on American civilians. So actually the way the description of PSYOP is to influence the hearts and minds of foreign target audiences. So it's not something that you're supposed to use domestically.
Illegal to use it.
Yeah. Even though we get around it, all the time. I think it was like Smith and Burt's or something like that. There's an actual article that tells us that we can't use it here in the States. And so we get around that by saying information operations or
marketing,
military. That'll blow your mind too. So we're I may have told you this, but people, we're not supposed to use PSYOP on the American public, but then people get out and then they go into marketing organizations, and what are they doing? They're not going to just say, well, I'm just going to throw away all this training. They're going to use that training to help them forward the agenda of the marketing company. Or they go into political strategy and then they use that information to help, this
or
politician or media. And so they are using it.
Yep.
They're just
renaming it, rebranding it.
Yeah. They're saying, I'm not using PSYOP. Yeah, yes, you are. It's all, Bernays and all of these guys help develop.
And Bernays is directly related to Sigmund Freud.
Yes.
And what's funny is that one of the founders of Netflix is actually related to Bernays.
Oh, wow. I did not know
That's a big PSYOP.
Yeah.
And that's true. You can look that up.
Wow.
He's directly related.
Wow.
So, you go from the father of modern psychology to the father of propaganda to the CEO of Netflix.
Wow. That's pretty impactful. Yeah. And that's it, right? So these guys help develop and create how we think. And then they created these programs to help us manipulate and influence people and how they think. And so, that's the foundation of a lot of this.
So let's talk about this hook. This is something that I find so interesting, because this is the most important part for me. Because if you can find someone's hook, that's their Achilles heel. And online, it's pretty easy to find someone's hook, because you can just like trigger them with different comments.
Yeah.
And as soon as they start responding, you're like, oh, a little sensitive area here, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you attack that sensitive area until they break. That's kind of like what we've been seeing online with bots and stuff. And that's how that works.
Yeah.
Can you explain what exactly a hook is and what you do to use that hook?
Yeah. So one of the ways that we look at PSYOP is we're always looking at how do we influence a person based on their values or belief system, or, their emotions, things of that nature. And those things can be considered hooks. They are things that a person is doing subconsciously and reacting to in their life based on their belief system and the structure of how they walk in the world, that it's very difficult for them to break free. So for instance, we'd say like, food could be a hook, right? And we see people addicted to different types of food, and they're like, man, I know I need to stop this, but I can't, right? And then, you will see like this commercial for these golden McDonald's fries and the salt and stuff, and it makes people salivate, and then they're like, oh, I need those fries, even though they know they shouldn't be doing that. So I like to explain it like, well, what do we know of a hook? Normally, we think of hooks as things that go on the end of fishing lines and go in the water, and fish bite them shits all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you think the fish, the council of fish don't get together and say we shouldn't do that, but they're still doing it.
Wow.
And that's because, and then you go to fishing shops and they have different lures, and the lures look different ways. And they say, oh, this one gets a lot of bites with the bass, and this one gets a lot of bites with these type. And so we're on that scale, we're doing the same. They're doing the same thing as what, governments are doing to the people, or other organizations are doing to the people, where that hook and what's on it, it's something that it's really tough for you to resist. And I tell people, if some of us have bad habits like picking our fingers. Like for me, it's picking my fingers sometimes. And I know I've said plenty of times I want to stop doing that. Right. And then I'll get really, especially when I'm deep in thought, I'll start picking at my fingers. Yeah. And then I'm like, don't do that. Don't do that, because that's bad for your fingers. And then I'll be like, okay, so what was I thinking about? Yeah. Okay.
Right back to it.
Right back to it. And so the hook would be that thing.
So for me, if I was doing a talk on stage and I wanted to target you directly, to single you out, I might use an arbitrary example and be like, there's a lot of people low on the IQ level that like pick their fingers, these type of people. And I would just go on, and you'd be like,
oh, that's me.
All of a sudden, yeah, you'd feel targeted, insecure,
yeah,
and
that
would
look for that reaction.
That's right. And then you would start questioning yourself.
Yeah.
Am I low IQ? How is that correlated?
Yeah.
How do I, and it would bother you, right? So like, that's the idea of like, you can find really specific hooks for specific people.
Yeah. And that's what's so insidious, or, very powerful about PSYOP, because what happens is once you find that hook, it makes things so much easier, because all you do is package everything, every message you want to get within the confines of that hook. And then people just eat it up, because they can't, a lot of us aren't consciously aware enough to know, like, hey, did we just accept it? And so I used to hear debates all the time. Now, a lot of people don't trust the media, but I used to hear debates all the time. Well, I listen to Fox and you listen to CNN, and I do this and I do that, and CNN always lies to you guys, and Fox is always lying to you guys, and they're telling us this news station is telling us the truth. And then you had that like Sinclair video come out, and then you see like, it's all like scripted, and it's all side by side, and it didn't matter if it was Fox or CNN. They're saying the same thing because these guys are owned by the same and people start, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on there?
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces. But we are concerned about troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
Plaguing our country.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
And I still think people didn't really get.
But that's it. Most people were like, "That's probably AI.
Yeah,
that can't be real."
Yeah,
and they're completely fooled.
Yeah, because they gotta be, or else it calls into question so many choices. It's almost like when you go to a court, and if they found out like a judge or a lawyer or some firm or whatever was, a bunch of crackheads or drug addicts, right? Then it calls into question, or they were dirty cops. It calls into question everything that they've done before that. And now we got to go back and review all of that. And that's devastating. So companies don't want to look at it. They're like, oh, let's just say Chris had a problem and kick him out of it. Well, if we admit that Chris had a problem with drugs or alcohol and while he was doing these cases, then we have to open up all those cases again, and that's going to hurt our stats, and then we're going to have to, and that's going to be too costly. So let's not say he had a drug problem. Let's say he had like an affair with somebody, because then that doesn't call into question these things, and so. There's all this manipulation happening. But going back to the point, which is that when people recognize that, like you said, they would then have to call into question the choices that they made and the things that they've done based on the information that they got from that news source. And so it's much easier to just say it's AI.
Yeah.
And it's much easier for those news sources to say, we didn't say that. That was AI.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then,
exactly.
And now because you got all these brains out there searching for a way to make this right, reconcile it in their brain, that they're like, okay, yeah, we knew that. We're on your side, right. And then they can use that in their arguments to when somebody says, oh, you still listen to them? Remember that story that came out where it showed all these things? Oh, no, that was AI. That was AI. They were trying to disprove my trusted source, and they'll defend it. That is the best way to really have PSYOP be effective.
Or do a quick Google search.
Yes.
And the number one search result is, it was AI. True or not? True or not, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, I did my search.
Exactly.
That's my search.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we talked about this before, where one of the main persuasive tactics is not to force something on somebody for them to believe it, right? If you're a tyrant, eventually people are going to rebel and overcome. The way you do this best, the way you do PSYOP best, is you set the conditions for people to make the choices in which you want them to make, but those conditions make them make that choice so that they feel like they made the choice based on their own free will, not because they was forced into that choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and we saw
completely.
we saw that with some things that happened over the last few years, where people went from I'm totally against that to like making the choice, and then people fighting with each other because they made the choice and you should make the choice, and so on and so forth. And then you have all this information going out there that supports one side or the other, and then people are using that as a means to firm up and shore up their stance, right? So you set the conditions for people to make the choices that you want them to make, but feel like they made them based on their own research and knowledge. They will then defend that choice because it's their choice.
Yeah.
But if you force it on them, then they'll always, push that choice. At some point, that choice can come into question, and they could push it off and say, well, Chris did tell me that, and I don't know if I trust him anymore. But if I'm like, nah, I went out there, I did the homework, I found it on this site, I found it on this site, I did this, that, and the other, then it's a lot harder to convince you otherwise, because you feel like you found it based on your own personal research.
So this is a lot like in magic, we talk about contrast. So the greater the contrast without breaking your objective view of reality, the greater the reaction. So the greater the contrast between your view of reality and this impossible event.
Yeah.
So the greater that is, without breaking it, without becoming fantasy. So staying within your confines of your objective view of reality and how reality works. If I can bend that and create a big enough contrast without breaking it, bigger reaction.
Yeah.
Right? So it helps to create a big contrast when they are determining what is real. They are determining the extremes of their own reality.
Yeah.
Right. So they're the ones making the framework for the trick.
Yeah.
They're the ones determining, no, that's impossible, or only this is possible.
Yeah.
But you led them to those points.
Yeah.
Because you want them to be at those extremes so that this trick plays a lot bigger. Because if that contrast is smaller and they don't do their own research, it's hearsay from someone else, or, then the effect isn't as great.
Yeah.
So the bigger the contrast and the more free will that is involved, well, then the greater the contrast, the greater the effect, right?
Yeah.
So the more that they can be involved in the process of creating the framework for how they think, the greater the effect of the PSYOP is going to be.
Exactly. And the length, the greater the length at which it will continue to persist in their lives.
Right.
Right.
In their memory.
Yeah. And it'll go longer and longer and longer. But like you said, the shorter that effect, the smaller that effect, it'll feel like really intense for a little while, but it'll start to die down. It'll fade down. But the greater that contrast, it'll stick around for a long time, and they'll keep telling the stories. We talked about a person who was telling stories over and over and over again. Every time they see you, they keep telling the same story, and it's like months that's gone by, and they're still telling that story.
And it's getting crazier.
Yeah, and it's getting more, grand, and and it's like, that effect will continue to persist in their mind, and they're doing the work for you. Now, a matter of fact, they're not only doing the work for you, they're making the work more substantial because they keep adding stuff onto it, putting stuff in there. And that would be the greatest PSYOP.
Then there's groups that reinforce that idea because they also feel that way. So they will then support you and encourage you to keep believing that, which,
Yep. There's echo chambers or the bandwagon effect, where people want to jump on the bandwagon, and then we're all on this bandwagon together, Don't jump off.
Questioning the bandwagon gets you
kicked off.
Yeah, or worse.
And so that's it, I was always amazed in PSYOP to realize that it is the foundation of everything. It's probably one of the most powerful tools we have. We think guns and bombs and all this crap is like super powerful. No, those things have no power until we get more robots and AI. But anyway, those things have no power without the people behind them. And so we are physical representations of how we feel and what we are on the inside, right? And that's one of the things that I learned from ninjutsu is that our physical reality tends to be a manifestation of who and what we're feeling on the inside. So you want to know how a person thinks and you want to know how a person operates, just look at how they're operating in the world and then track that backwards.
Whoa.
And you'll start to see who they are deep inside. And
above, so below.
Yes, exactly. And that's really what we have to recognize. So then if we know that, then we know bullets don't fly and bombs don't go off unless the people behind them are actually giving those orders. And then there are reasons why they might give those orders. And those reasons are based on how they perceive the world. And so if you're manipulating and influencing how people perceive the world, you have the ability to start conflict or end conflict or get conflict to be, like a balance and neutralize, So this is really the overall idea when you're looking at the PSYOP ability. And so we realized when we were fighting in, Germany at that time, Hitler, I should say, when we were going against him, like the power of true propaganda, like that dude was like amazing, and his general and the people that he had around him that were working for him. He had one specific guy, I can't remember his name, but this guy was the head of his propaganda.
Was it Goebbels
machine.
Or
say it one more time?
Goebbels?
That sounds like it is.
Yeah.
And this dude was in charge of all of his propaganda and stuff like that. And he was a genius.
And it was before the internet.
Yeah.
Right. So you were in this incredible echo chamber. But they were really the first ones to capitalize on that type of propaganda and create this patriotic, because, and that's often what people think of, like, how evil are these are these Nazis. It's like the individuals who were Nazis, like most of them were just like everyone else.
Yeah.
They, over time, really, a lot of them were forced to it. There's a whole, gamut of reasons, why that happened. But one of the major reasons was the psychological warfare against their own people.
Yes.
And it convinced them that they were the good guys.
Yes.
And that everybody else was bad. And so they attacked it from a very justifiable position. They're like, no, I'm doing the right thing, which was indeed the worst thing.
Yeah.
But the PSYOP was so great that it convinced them that they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, that's scary.
It's very scary. And so there are two things that I want to say on that topic. One was this really cool video game that I ended up finding a long time ago, was introduced to me by a friend of mine who was also training in ninjutsu. And he was like, oh, let me tell you the backstory of this game. And so it was like a ninja game, right? And there was this clan, and it had the eldest brother, middle brother, and a sister. And they were like these really badass ninja, right? And the eldest brother was the best. And he went out on this mission. He ended up falling off this roof. He hit his head, and this other rival ninja clan, found him. And instead of killing him, once they realized they were going to interrogate him, but they realized he lost his memory. So they were like, oh, we didn't know who you were. You're actually one of us. And they indoctrinated him in their clan, right? Reprogrammed him, right? And so then he started fighting for them. And eventually he comes across his brother and sister, and they're like, we thought you were dead. And he was like, you're the enemy. What are you talking about? And so his whole scope of reality shifted. And so who was originally bad and his enemy became his friend, or his family, and then his family actually became his enemy. And so it's like, it was this big twist. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like, depending on what perspective we're looking at and what information we're fed, we can be really easily manipulated into thinking that people are subhuman or not human or so on. And I mean, we see that in our country. If we look at our timeline, whoever we were at war with at whatever time, that group gets a hard rap, you know, all across the board. It doesn't matter if we know some good folks, they're different from that, everybody else, and we start bringing up these really questionable things. The other thing is that in our ninja training, we actually have an 8-step accomplishment plan, we call it. And the first one is truth is relative. Try to see things from others' perspective without losing your own. Try to see things as they really are, but stay tuned in, right? And so what it says, what it gets us as ninja to recognize is that, we might have our version of what we deem the truth, but it's relative to my scope and what I do. The problem comes when I'm trying to force my truth on you. And that's what creates conflict, right? And so it's saying, be very mindful of that. Be mindful of this idea that truth is relative based on my perception and the people I'm around. This is the truth. But it doesn't keep me from trying to see things from your perspective, right? Without losing my own.
Great advice.
Does that make sense?
So it
doesn't mean I have to give up my truth to understand your truth. It just means that I can hold on to mine, and I'm still open to sharing and seeing things from your perspective without losing my own. And then I'm also going to try to stay tuned in, because our truths are not the only truths, or maybe there's a part of what you know that changes what I understand about the world.
And you wouldn't know otherwise.
And I wouldn't know otherwise. And that's what I tell people today. They say, well, how do we beat PSYOP? Because we got to, I say, dude, go out and find somebody who you believe has a different opinion than you and have that conversation and see what they think. Because now PSYOP it works well because we are a third party.
Right.
We're using media and radio and television and this and that. And if you're looking at that, you don't know if it's true or not. We're watching this person on the news, and they're telling us this thing, and we're thinking we connect with that person, so we think he's telling us the truth or she's telling us the truth. And instead, really what I need to be doing is having a conversation with you directly.
Yeah.
And instead of relying on this person to tell me how to think, and we have a hard time doing that.
Of course.
So cut out the middleman and go and have a conversation. Now, that's still a different battle, because then your belief system based off your news or wherever you're getting your information is influencing you, and wherever I'm getting my information is still influencing it. But we have a greater chance of overcoming that when we can debate in person than if we're debating through a television screen.
Yeah.
You know?
Seems like removing the ego is key to all of
Yes.
this, because I think that's the one thing that prevents us from doing that, because on paper, everything you're saying makes complete sense.
Yes.
In the real world, ego gets in the way.
Yeah.
And we'd rather stick to our guns than to, drop our hands down for 2 seconds and just listen and try to really picture a different scenario, because by doing that, you play a passive action. You take a passive position.
Yeah.
And most people aren't comfortable taking a passive position, especially when it comes to things that they really care about.
Yeah.
And so that's, a lot of that is just removing the ego.
Yeah.
And like, all right, what do you have to say? And really, like you said, you'd probably be surprised how much the other person's perspective can actually strengthen your own if you listen, right? Or help you with your own.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that's really important. I had this conversation with somebody before, and, I'm just being bare and raw, but I had a friend or I have a friend, and I remember I'd never been to his house. And I go over his house, and, I'm a kid from New Jersey and so on and so forth. Didn't know much about the South until I moved to the South, and I was still sheltered because I was in the military, and that's a different environment, different culture. And I end up going to this friend's house, and he had a Confederate flag hanging on his wall, right? And I was like, whoa, I thought this guy, like, I didn't know he was like that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait a minute, like what? Like everything, I've known this guy for years, and everything he's ever done in my life has been super positive, and we've been able to connect and so on and so forth. So I went into we were in his garage. I went into his little room, and he was there, and I was like, hey, like, I saw the Confederate flag out there. What are you doing with that? The way from what I know, it says, hey, that you believe in the support of a group that says that, my culture, or at least the Black culture, could be, suppressed and like held down and all this other stuff. And he was like, oh no, that's not when I came up, this was like a symbol of pride for the South and this, that, and other. That's not what was taught to me. And we had this long debate, right? And at the end, there were some things that we agreed on, and there were some things we didn't agree on. But the one thing we could agree on was that we loved and supported each other.
Yeah.
And that was not, and he even was like, do you want me to take that down if it makes you feel bad? And I was like, after this conversation, actually, no, man, this is your house and so on and so forth. But I feel much better knowing that wasn't the perspective you were coming from. But if I had just said, oh, no, F that guy, he's this, that, and other, he's racist, blah, 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 then we would not have been able to get through. And we're still friends to this day. And again, when I say support, I mean, this dude has supported me on so many different things in so many different ways. So his actual actions and the way he really operates in life is not like that at all.
Right.
But he came from a different perspective and a different background. And so we all have our shit, and we have to recognize that.
Yep. We
all have our shit. We're all dealing with stuff. We all have these beliefs that we haven't really deeply examined, that comes from where we come from, or and sometimes those things, we just do things and don't really deeply examine them. Yep. And then somebody calls us out, and that's where the real work begins. We have these conversations, and we say, okay, well, let me have this deep conversation with you about this thing, and then we can get through it. Again, if I let the flag dictate who my friend is, because this guy I've known for years who supported me in all these different ways, and now I'm using that as a means to say all that doesn't exist anymore, and that all this bullshit, the only thing that matters is this, and not have a conversation, then I thwart any growth that could ever happen, versus us having a growing moment together, he and I, and him recognizing that made me feel a certain way, and apologizing, and me recognizing that wasn't where he was coming from, and apologizing, and us still not agreeing 100%. I'm not saying that. Yep. But agreeing enough to where we were able to stay friends.
Yeah, it isn't binary, these things. The human spectrum of all the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There are an infinite number of variables that impose themselves. And I guess being somebody, whether you're a magician, whether you're a PSYOP expert, you're looking to figure out as many of those variables as you can.
Yeah.
But there's still variables you didn't plan for.
Yeah.
There's still things that will take you off guard and be like, well, I didn't plan for this. I didn't prepare for this. And understanding those will actually help you on, the future, with the future things. Okay. Dude, thank you so much for sharing all this about the PSYOP stuff. And I'm endlessly fascinated. I could talk about PSYOP for the rest of this podcast because it relates so closely to what
we'll have to do a part 2.
To what I do. We definitely have to do a part 2. But I do also want to get onto, some other interesting things because you lead such an interesting life. The next thing I want to talk about is your relationship to remote viewing. Mm-hmm. Now, as some of you know, if you guys aren't aware, I spent a year researching remote viewing, practicing it, meeting, some of the people who are the figureheads of remote viewing, Edwin May and McMonigal and Ed Dames and even Uri Geller. And I spoke to all these people who really taught me quite a bit, and Brett Stewart. And it was just so fascinating. And I went into it a skeptic, knowing magic, knowing techniques and confirmation bias and cold reading and this stuff. But after seeing the results myself, I came to the conclusion, after looking at the data, because there's a lot of data, that there was something there. There's definitely something there. How did you, knowing what you know, because almost having a magician like mine, how did you get into remote viewing, and what happened to made you believe in this?
So I was already kind of down the remote viewing rabbit hole to a degree with my ninjutsu. So the ninja had these 9 abilities, this kuji, these syllables, these 9 syllables or 9 powers that they worked in, and and this came from originally. It was tradition that came out of India and then into China and Tibet and then to Japan. And then they kind of wove their views and different things and had these different practices. And the ninja were these villagers that used that as a means to help them survive and thrive in this society that really wanted to destroy them. And so one of the abilities is remote viewing. So I remember having conversations with my teacher, this guy, Stephen K. Hayes, and he was saying, hey, there was this time when the army and the military got really into like this thing called remote viewing. We know it as something different, of this like Kuji 6 or 7, and where we worked it from a different angle, and they wanted to kind of see what I knew about it, and they had me fill out all this paperwork, and it was actually through the Air Force with Dale Graff. And when Dale Graff was working, he was interested in it before he actually took over the unit for the Army. And so he did some stuff and he was talking about that. So I was still very physical at the time. And so the spiritual stuff was exciting, but not as exciting as the physical stuff, And so he talked about it. We did some meditations and stuff, but then that was it. Well, later on in my life, I came to this point where I'm teaching at my different martial arts schools that I own. And I would see children now are all into these animation characters, and they would run around and they would do these mudras and they would act like they were like summoning dragons and stuff. And I'd be like, man, this is cool. This is like it was these ninja cartoons and other cartoons like it that was using this lore.
Naruto, Dragon Ball.
Yeah, that comes from this actual stuff, you know? And I would try to have these conversations like, hey kids, you could really, we got things like that in our art, and they'd be like, really? Yeah, show me, And I was like, well, if I wanted to show them, how did I learn? And I was like, well, I spent 25 years with my teacher and doing stuff and diving into this on my own and leaving New Jersey to move to Ohio to train my teacher in the woods and everything else. And I'm like, okay, kid, train for 25 years with me and I'll get you there, And they're like, I'm going to go back to, doing my pretending. And I was like, well, if I the youth are the next generation. If I really want to get them to understand and not lose this knowledge that I've worked so hard to gain, and others have too, we need to make it fun and exciting and something easy where they can have an experience right now with that truth, and then be able to thrive and grow in that grow and thrive in that experience. And so I said, well, who's out there doing stuff like that? And then the remote viewing came back. And I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should get involved in that and really see what protocols are out there. And started looking into that and found my first teacher, Paul Smith, who is an amazing gentleman, and he knows so much about this field. And then that led me to another mentor, Tom McNair. And then that led me to another mentor, Bill Ray. And then I trained under Joe McMonagle and took his classes. And, I've been taking some of Lynn Buchanan's classes. And so I just started gaining this knowledge. And the goal was, how do we get youth to have these experiences in a controlled manner that allow them to explore this and then hopefully grow up with this, because a lot of the people I talk to find it much later in life, but if we can get little ones to really enjoy and grow in that power, then that would be ideal. And that also led me to Mindsight too, that same quest. So, yeah.
Is that like the hot pink or red or something like
Yes, it is a hot pink.
that? Is that green?
Yes, it is.
Okay, orange.
Yes, it is. That's 3 in a row that you have gotten right.
Is that something you find, because obviously with the talk of psionics and this recruitment, they're saying they're recruiting these children from all around the world who have been in traumatic events. And have you also seen like a correlation between the strength of the psi and like the age of the student?
I would say yes. I think that the kids that there's a weird dynamic happening because there's still so many adults who don't believe, right? And youth are they're mirror neurons, which help them succeed and adapt to life. They're watching the people in their environment, and they're gaining a lot of their perspective based off those people. And so chances are, if mom and dad really don't believe in this, that kid is going to have some struggles really understanding, even if they have an event, if they have that first timer effect where they just like knock it out of the park. After that, it may diminish because their environment doesn't support it or doesn't really talk about it or do it or whatever. And so I have seen that youth are willing to try a lot easier and dive in and have success. But I also see diminish in some youth based on the fact that their family doesn't, follow that script. And here's a perfect example of that is that I had these kids that I was working with. I call it gut training so that I don't cross any lines or anything with other type of belief systems and stuff. So I just say, hey, we're learning gut training. How do you, which is true self-defense, right? How do I...
Instinct.
Instinct. I'm looking at this person who's smiling at me, and really in the back of their mind and heart, they want to kidnap me and take me away from my family. But they're saying all the right things. Hey, kid, I'm your buddy. Here, take this. So I have to use something else to help me feel that out. And instinct in my gut will tell me through this intuition that this person's not right. But my logic brain, because I don't want to use my intuition anymore because my immediate environment at home tells me that's crap and we don't do that, then I go along with it and now I'm gone, right? So I say, hey, we're just trying to build up that gut and your instinct and get you that intuition that you need to kind of survive these threats, But really, I'm trying to get them to a different place, but I'm using that as a vehicle to help them grow.
Not to cut you off, but just so everyone's aware, you teach a lot of this stuff.
Yes.
You have students of all different age groups.
Yes.
And you teach the ninja stuff, the Mindsight stuff, and this particular thing. So just for those of you listening, you've been teaching for how long now?
I've had my school in operation for 17 years.
Yeah.
I've been teaching for probably 20 years in
Okay.
martial arts, or more. Yeah.
All right. Sorry to cut you off, but I did
Yeah.
feel like that was important to get out of the way, that people understand that like you're not just telling some random kids to like trust their gut, that you have a school and you've been doing this for a long time. That was my bad. I didn't set that up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for going back to make sure that, I don't get beat up on the internet. um, yeah, so that I had this kid in there and they're playing these games and I put a blindfold on and they got to like do stuff and, with the blindfold. And I one day was like, hey, let's have your moms do it, that are out there watching this. And the kids were like, yeah, I want to get mom involved. So they go and grab mom. Moms come out there, put the mask on. Some moms are doing well. Another mom is doing well. And then one of them takes the mask off and she says, I thought he was pretending this whole time. I thought it was fake. I thought he had to be peeking through the mask. She's like, but you can't see anything through that thing. So then that gave me this epiphany of like, wow, what she basically just said without saying was that at home, she's thinking it's just all made up and pretend.
Make believe, yeah.
And if he's at home with her most of the time, if he's like, hey, I want to do gut training, she's like, oh, yeah, we don't do that pretend stuff. You just do that when you're at the martial arts school. And that could potentially shut down that youth wanting to explore that and wanting to grow in that. And so, again, that was my initial way into me wanting to get deeper into remote viewing. But also for me personally in my life, I am truly trying to follow this ninja path. And so these 9 abilities that they had, I'm really trying to embody that and then go through the process of doing that, because this was these 9, once you obtained or was able to really, really grow in these 9 abilities, it was what they call, you become what they call a tatsujin, which is like this fully actualized human being, right?
Well-rounded person.
Well-rounded. And I've also study and train in yoga, and we have the gross plane, the subtle plane, and the causal plane, and you exploring all of those and really getting to a point where you embody all of those takes you to this other level where you're in this really you're a fully actualized human being. You're somebody who can really explore all aspects of what it means to be human, which is the term yoga, which means to join or union, right? You're joining all of who you are together. So it's not just me being physical, or it's not just me being gross subtle plane or a gross plane, or it's not me just being in the subtle plane. It's me weaving together all those in a very nice balance and really fully exploring what all that means and how they all interrelate, so that we operate very well and efficiently and to our greatest potential. And that's what my goal is personally for my own life. And I see that if I can give even a little one extra taste of another aspect of their, multidimensional nature, then I've done my job, hopefully, as an instructor or a teacher for that person's life. And I've also helped bring into the world someone who's going to be a more powerful being who hopefully fights for, when I say fight, I don't mean like, but, really pushes for more light in the world and more love in the world, because they recognize their own they recognize a little bit more about the magnitude of who they really are, which helps them recognize the magnitude of what they really are in the grand scheme of things and how all that connects to one another.
Wow. I mean, that's a lofty goal, but I think, I've seen the videos you've sent me where, you're with your students and they're doing the mind sight things. And for those who aren't aware, there are these things called mindfolds, which are like blindfolds, but better. They're completely blackout. I use them actually for meditating because no light gets into these things. There's no peeking. Like, I mean, okay, sure, there's ways that you can probably rig it up. I'm a magician, right? Like, I mean, I can make a blindfold that I can look through, okay? But that's not what these are. And it's completely dark, like no lights getting in. And these kids and these students, what they're doing is they have colors in front of them, and then they have a pile of like cardboard papers or whatever, and they're kind of sensing, somehow perceiving, in some cases, I guess even seeing in their mind's eye, what colors these papers are, and they're putting them in the right piles. And there's some examples of that in the telepathy tapes as well, which was really cool to see. And when I see this, man, like I'm not alone in thinking and being skeptical when I see this, right? Because I've seen some pretty incredible stuff, and when I look at that, I'm like, that's so insane.
Yeah.
That like my brain glitches out and it goes straight to Occam's razor, and Occam's razor tells me you can see it.
Yeah.
You're cheating, right? That's Occam's razor.
Yeah.
But in this case, they're not. And it's just so hard to reconcile as an adult who, has a view of reality, walks around every day. It's hard for an adult to reconcile that.
Yeah.
Be like, how does that fit in my reality now?
Yeah.
Like, how does that even work? So when you're doing these exercises, do you, first of all, this has happened to you too. You practice this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that like? Is it a sensation? Is it a vibration? Is it a sense? Like, how does that work?
I think your question is huge, and it has many layers to it. And the first layer is when we look at it and we think, it's got to be something more. I don't understand.
Right.
There was a time, I would stray to say, in human history where that wasn't the case. Oh, the shaman, the this, the that, those coming in, this is my theory. I think it's a little more than a theory, but I want to stay open. Those coming in, the children, spent most of their time with those going out, the grandparents, in these tribes, in these small communities or groups or whatever. And the grandparents, the kids have this unique perspective because they're not really bound by the world. And then the grandparents, those who are going out, are losing, their binds of the world. They're going back to source, and these guys are coming out of source. And then the people in between, the parents, are hunting and fishing and building and doing those things. They may still believe in those things, but they have things that they got to do to make sure that the village survives. So the youth are getting trained by those individuals, these older individuals. And then as they come into adulthood, they have that understanding already. I think it was supported back then. And then they had shaman and medicine people who were helping. And so they were a lot more in tune. But now in this paradigm, we are a lot more skeptical because we live in this kind of materialistic, reductionistic society, and science has really helped us come along in some ways. But I mean, we've had all of these experiences in science where we thought shit was not real, where we said it can't be, that the earth goes around the sun, that there's no such thing as things in the air called germs we can't see that can infect people and do all that stuff. And we'll kill you for it if you say it again, And then somehow that flipped over. And so I only wanted to talk about that point because, there are people who still say, no, that can't be. It's got to be them tricking and playing and so on and so forth. But then I don't think that's how we always thought. I think that was probably the minority at some point in time. And the majority was like, yeah, of course, we can talk to, I've talked to a Native American man who said, oh yeah, the ancestors used to talk about, like, how did you know you could eat that plant and that one? Was it just that everybody died who ate that one? And then enough people said it. And then they said, and these guys would say, no, the plant told us.
Whoa.
And now we have all this research coming out that's saying like plant are these sentient beings and that they're communicating with each other and that, there's mycelium under the ground that's telling this tree over here and this tree 1,000 miles away, like what's on its way. And we can prove that. And, but these old ancient people were saying, oh yeah. They're like, oh, you're just figuring that out? Like we've been writing about this and telling it in what we call in Japanese martial arts, the okuden, like this verbal transmission for generations. But you're just figuring that out. Like,
yeah, we don't need to understand the science to use it.
Yes. Yeah. Or to have, what is faith? To have that belief that it's there and understand that. But I wanted to definitely preface that and say like, okay, yeah, there's that. And then there's, okay, well, what is happening when I do my mind sight, when I do my remote viewing. And I can tell you it's really odd. It's a knowing. And a lot of people have been using that the more I've been in this circle where it's just a knowing. And I remember my teacher, Paul Smith, he would say, if you think that it is this color or if it's the shape, this shape or whatever, you're probably wrong. If you feel like it is, though, you're probably right. So if you're like, I don't even understand why I'm writing, I don't know. I just feel like I should write square, and I don't know. And I've seen people when they first learn, they go through that I don't know stage. What do you mean write something down? Yeah, tell me what's in the box. How am I going to tell you in the box? Just write the first thing that comes to mind. No, I don't understand. And they just start writing. And they're like, I don't get it. What am I supposed to be writing here? Well, what colors come to mind? Oh, blue, but why? Why blue? Black. Why black? And they're just fighting it. Their logic is just like resisting. And then you open the box and they're like, holy bejesus.
That's what happened to me. You feel so silly doing these things.
Yeah.
And there is that sort of detachment from what it used to be, where you used to be like feel empowered with these things. Now you do feel silly. Like, you're forced to feel silly. You're kind of bullied into thinking that this isn't real. Right.
Yeah.
So, I remember doing the sessions, and during the sessions, I would always I'd meditate and I'd feel good. Right. And like you said, like sometimes you just know you're like, whew, I'm getting a really good feeling about this. And you'll just do it, whatever. And then as soon as it's done, I'm like, and then it's time to open the envelope, and I'd always be like, oh no, that's probably all wrong. And then the doubt would sink in, and then I'd be like, no, this is stupid. I'm stupid. What am I doing? This is not going to work. And then I start doubting myself. But then I open the envelope, and sure, lo and behold, I was like, whoa. But I go through that phase, that doubt phase after, not during. It's just right before opening the envelope, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look so dumb. I'm gonna look like there's egg on my face. Like this is gonna suck.
Yeah.
And it turns out that that knowing really does translate. And another thing I found is after doing it a lot, you would start to recognize that knowing.
Yes.
And that's the practice.
Yeah.
And I only found that out after, because I was like, how do you practice just gut checking things? And you remember how it is you felt when a piece of information gets confirmed. You remember what that felt like when you perceived it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it happens again, you go, oh, and you get excited, and then you do it, and then you find out, oh, and it doesn't always match, but sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you start to build a sort of repertoire of these senses and how that, how those made you feel. But I also found out that relying too much on that isn't good either, because then you start getting overconfident, and the ego gets in the way, and it's so touchy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be related to, how does a person know when they shoot a 3-point shot that it's going to make it? And when I played basketball, and then also talked to people who would play basketball, there'd be times I remember this guy, he almost all the time from the free throw line, he'd throw this thing up, and he would make it in there. Right. And then he got to a point where he would just come down the court, throw it up, turn around, run back, and it would just make it. And I'm sitting there in the center, waiting for the rebound. And then I look over and I see him walking back, and then I look up, and and I'm like, how did that dude know? And they'll just say I don't know. I just know everything feels right when I put it in the air, but they still sometimes miss. Right. But they get better at recognizing that sense, recognizing what it feels like when the knowing is happening, and giving us that opportunity to understand that. It's a story that I have that came to mind when you were saying that, where I had an employee once, and I noticed he would get this one meal, and every time he would get this meal, he would gargle a little bit when he talked, like he had phlegm in his throat, and he'd start coughing. And one day I said to him, I said, did you ever notice when you eat that meal you're eating, that you start getting a lot of phlegm, and, you start coughing a lot? And he was like, no, I don't think that's, he was like, no, I never noticed that. And I don't think it's there. And I was like, okay, cool. And I just went on about my business. And a month later, he comes back to me and he said, you know what? Since you said it that one time, I've been paying attention, and every time I eat it, I get tons of phlegm and all this stuff. And so, yeah, that changed my perspective, right? So I brought his awareness and his attention to it. And he was aware enough to go back and like pay attention to it. And then he was able to work something out where now he knows that he's not going to feel too well after he eats this meal, you know? And that sometimes is why having a good teacher is important because they can help you have those moments. And or just being able to be mindful and pay attention to what's happening in your world. And that's part of the growth in these skills is having that awareness of when the knowing is happening. Because at first it's like, I don't know what's going on. It's just and then after a while you start having that moment where you're like, oh, every time I kind of feel this little thing, then that's happening. And we see that with the mind sight too. We'll have people like use their hand and they'll look for things. And I talk to people and I'll say, hey, like, how did you know? And they're like, oh, one kid was telling me they feel like somebody pressing on their hand. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I've had kids who start where they're like, I don't know, I just knew it was there. And then later they'll be like, you know, I was thinking about what you said. And every time I get over the bag, my hand gets really cold, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Let's pay attention to that for next time. And then they're paying attention now. So, and then their stats get higher and higher because now they have the understanding of what that signal is and then go from there. And then there's this thing where, we call it your language. Sometimes their language changed. So now it's not cold, but it's hot, and then they're like, oh man, I'm getting it wrong. And then they start getting them right. And I say, well, what happened between when you were getting it wrong? Well, I remember it used to get cold, but then today, for whatever reason, it's not getting cold anymore, but it gets hot. And so I started choosing hot and then I was getting them right. And it's like, oh, okay, well, isn't that interesting that we change as individuals from a day-to-day basis, right? You have different days where you're susceptible to more things or you feel different ways based on how you went to bed, how much sleep you got, maybe what your chemistry is on that day. And we do know that that's a fact that your constitution isn't always 100% the same as the day before as it is today, based on all of this balancing act that's going on in your body.
The signal is so faint that any like little bit of lack of sleep or you ate too much or you're not feeling too well, like any of that is going to affect the signal or sort of how you perceive the signal, right? Is there, I'm so fascinated by this stuff. Like there's so many things I want to get to, but I do want to transition from here in a second. But first I want to ask, just for the audience at home, is there like a cool remote viewing story that you have personally that you did that you like knocked your socks off?
That knocked my socks off. I would say it's when I watch other people. There's several people I know that are really, really good. But I'd say probably the time I was the most impressed with my remote viewing was the time I was the most stressed. And so I was trying to get this homework done for Paul. He has this, like, his program's super intensive. It's amazing. You got a bunch of homework you got to do once you get done with the program. And the only way you can make it to the next level is if you do all that homework. And so I believe, I was about to take his level 2, his intermediate course, but I had like one more homework assignment done, and I'm in school for integrative health medicine. I got my businesses, I got all this stuff going on, and I just wasn't able to get that last one done. And it's only like 2 days before I'm supposed to fly out. And so I'm thinking he's going to either make me do it when I get there or whatever. Excuse me. So I'm like, oh man, I got to get this done. I'm stressed. I'm like, I got like 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes to get this thing done. And, but when you do CRV, it could be a pretty lengthy process you got to go through. So I'm like, I'm gonna just have to do it. And whatever comes out, comes out. And then at least he'll tell me I'm wrong, but I'll have it in, like, so I'm gaming it in my mind and I'm sitting there, I'm at the table, I'm super stressed. I don't do a cool down. I don't try to get in the zone. I'm just like, all right, here's the numbers, and I'm writing it down. I start speeding through, I get to like 4 pages. And then I'm like, all right, I'm done. I'm just going to submit it. And I opened the thing up, and that was the best remote viewing I've ever done.
Whoa.
And it's like, whoa. So all the times when I like tried to get in the zone and like sit down and take my time and focus, I didn't do as good as when I was like, under pressure, and it, just didn't care. This goes to another story. So I'm going to segue into the story about when I got my 5th degree black belt in ninjutsu. So I'm going for I failed the first 2 times I went for this test. So in ninjutsu, we have the 5 elements, right? This 5 elemental manifestation, which, you can find in Chinese stuff and in Indian, Hindu faiths or beliefs. And so we have these 5 elements, and getting to your black belt, you go from earth to water to fire to wind to void, right? And then you get a black belt, and that's the mastery levels. And then 1st degree black belt is advanced earth. 2nd degree is advanced water, So here I am, I'm at this, 4th degree black belt, and I'm in here and I'm trying to, get through this process. And I've been in this kind of like fire mode, right? So actually it's mastery, then it's 2nd degree is like advanced earth or whatever. And so I'm in this fire mode, and I'm like, every time I come to the test, I'm like super athletic, and I'm like, doing this stuff, and I'm just like all over it, right? And they're like, nope, you don't pass. You did good. Nobody hit you. You were like connected, you're in there, you're doing all this stuff, but nah, you didn't pass yet. And so I'm like, what? I didn't pass. Like, this is crazy. Like, what's going on? They're like, you need to be more free. You need to let go. You need to kind of just move with it. You need to be a part of this thing. And I'm like, what? And they're like when? You're trying to get to win. You're trying to transition into the next piece. And so I'm like, I don't get it, So then I try another time and I fail again. And I'm like, and that time I was like really trying to get the stuff down. And I'm like, so I really got to a point where I was like, well, 4th degree black belt is enough. I don't need to be wrapped up in these belt things. I'm not going to test anymore. I'm going to try one more time. And if I don't do it, then all right, whatever. I still love my teacher. I love the people I'm training with. I'll just train, and I'm just done with testing now. I'm going to just be a 4th degree forever. So I go to that final test, and I'm like, my friend's like, are you going to test today? I was like, yeah. But he's like, are you nervous or anything? I said, nah, bro. I'm telling you as my witness, if I don't pass today, that's fine. I don't care. Whatever happens today happens, right? And I was just really adamant about that and really laid back. And I'm watching all other people test, and we have to do randori, what they call free response. So all these people come out and they're like trying to punch you and kick you, and it's not choreographed. You just gotta like freestyle, right? Wow. And it's not one-on-one. It's like people coming at you,
Are they actually trying to hit you?
Yeah, they got gloves on and they're trying to punch you, and
For real?
Yes, for real.
Whoa. Okay.
And so I get up there and I fix my uniform. I'm standing out there, and like all of the seniors, because I'm a senior black belt at that time, so only seniors attack you. So people your level or above. So juniors don't attack you. Normally, you don't get like a 1st degree or 2nd degree, because the things you might do are maybe too intense for them at that stage. And so you get 4th degrees, 5th degrees, 6th degrees attacking you if you're going for a 5th degree. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I'm out there and they say, go. And then stuff is happening, I guess. And then they're like, stop. And I'm like, and then my teacher comes up behind me, taps me on the shoulder with this sword, and then it's the sword test, and you got to like feel the intention, his murderous intent, and then you move out of the way at just the right time. The first 2 times I failed miserably, right? And he taps me on the shoulder to let me know that any moment now this could happen, and then all of a sudden I just move out of the way, and I look to my left, and the sword is right where I was standing. And then I hear everybody like, whoa, they're clapping, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, snap out of it. And my friend runs up to me and he's like, bro, that was the most amazing thing I ever saw. And in my brain and in my heart, I was like, what the fuck just happened? I lost all time. Like, I have no clue to this day. Like, when I took the test the first 2 times, I can tell you every move I made, every move he made, everything that happened. It wasn't until I let go and I really embodied letting go that I became the wind, which is our element, where you're like a leaf in the wind. the leaf in the wind is not trying to control the wind. The leaf in the wind is flowing with the wind. Wherever the wind is pushing, that's where it goes, you know? And I was like, and that's what happened. And then my friend Rick comes up to me and he's like, bro, I thought I was going to make you fail. I said, how? He's like, there's this time I was like, I just was in the energy of everything that was going on. I came up, I saw you, I went to punch you, and I was like, oh no, he's not gonna move. I'm gonna punch him right in the face and it's gonna make him fail his test. And he's like, I didn't know what to do. I was just like, it's coming. I put everything into that punch. And he said, and you disappeared. And I was on the floor. And he said, do you remember that? I said, no, I don't remember that at all. He was like, it was amazing. I was on the floor. Like, how did I get here? And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, are you sure you were trying? He was like, bro, I thought I was going to be the reason you failed. And he was like, and then you were just gone. And I was like, wow. And I didn't think about anything. I just knew. My body knew what it needed to do. You know, I was beyond reasoning or thinking through the thing and having to do the thing. I had let go. Just like in that moment, I'm like, hey, yeah, I don't care. You know, I just got to get this done. I got to get it turned into Paul so I can do this class. I don't care whatever comes out. Okay, even if I'm probably going to get it wrong. All right, whatever. Boom. So it's the best one I ever did.
Two things.
Yeah.
Stress and letting go.
Letting go.
So those two factors. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. It's almost like this neutral mind state.
Yeah.
Under duress.
Mm.
That's a hard combo.
Which oddly Jake Barber talked about.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going. They would induce stress, but also like calm you down. And like, so that's like the pocket. That's the zone.
That's the zone.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Let's get into talking about Psi Games.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this. Psi Games, pretty much the Psychic Olympics is the elevator pitch, as we said, which is amazing. A lot of amazing speakers are going to be there. Who else you got there? You got Sean Webb's going to be there, Chris Bledsoe,
Tom Campbell.
Oh wow, Tom Campbell.
Yep. Dr. Diane Powell.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have some big names.
All-star lineup.
Yeah, all-star lineup of people coming to talk and to share and teach, like yourself.
Yep. Yeah. You know? I'm coming to talk about, some stuff correlating to the art of magic and that'll be a lot of fun. But I think for the most part, what I'm mostly excited about is for the very first time, we're going to have or see a competitive psychic event. Can you walk us through what exactly that's going to look like?
Yeah. You mean the games themselves so the games I can't really expand upon just to make sure people don't start like
cheating.
Cheating and training for the game. So we're kind of keeping those secret. But on the website, we do have like a brief synopsis of like what it might be about and give you some practices that you can do meditatively to kind of help you get better at the skill you will need to.
Can you let us know what the categories are?
Yeah, so there are 5 categories, and they are remote viewing, mind sight, precognition, psychokinesis, and pendulum dowsing. And so I chose all 5 of those because when more you talk to people, it seems like they kind of share like a common thread between all of them. Like if you talk about remote viewing, some people think that it has a lot to do with precognition, especially if you get your feedback. You know, you might be seeing your future feedback. Mind sight, if you do that enough, sometimes you don't actually see the item. You actually just know it's a cup. You get what I'm saying? So you're like, you got this local awareness, almost like remote viewing would be non-local awareness. You know, you're feeling or perceiving something at a distance. And so, there's those threads. And so then you got we have individual competitions and we have team competitions. And so if you have a team of 5 people, the person who the team deems is the best at remote viewing will compete in the remote viewing challenges against other individuals from other teams. And if you are the best in mind side, you would compete in that, the person would choose that. And if you're just an individual and you don't know anybody and you're just like, I do this stuff, but I don't have a team, you can come and you can compete in those different categories against other people who are individuals competing in those categories. So that's kind of how we set it up. And yeah, it's the Psychic Olympics, man. It's going to be great.
So what, now here's the thing. When you first hear about this, you might be like, I'm sure some of you are like hyper skeptical and like, I mean, this all just sounds a little too strange for me.
Yeah.
But there is a point in doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want you to explain why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond just the sort of surface level, what this is, the psychic, it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
What's the point of doing this?
So that's a really beautiful question. I thank you so much for asking that, because like you said, we want to take it out of the hokey realm or the woo-woo realm,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the big term now. There's 2 points or 3 points, 3 reasons why I'm doing this. One is I'm a man of action. What's information without action? So right now, you have all of this stuff coming out about NHIs and UAPs and things of that nature, and waiting for disclosure. But we have disclosure, but we don't, and so one of the first things is like, well, you don't really need to. It changes the game when you can actually pick up the phone and dial the person, versus waiting for that person to call you, and to do that, you have to have that number, you have to have that relationship. And so how do we build the skills that we have, the abilities that we have that allow us to really know what we need to know, that knowing, right? And so, well, one way is that we have to know what the standard is, and then we can start to build on that, right? And that's one of my last reasons, but I wanted to bring it up first because of where we are and what we're talking about. My biggest reason, first, it came as a download, and I didn't want to believe that it should be done, because I was like, nobody's ever done this before, and and that's probably a reason, because it doesn't make sense or something, and I'm too busy, and then all these synchronicities kept popping up where it kept coming back into my life.
When you say download, through meditation?
Yeah, well, it wasn't actually like I was in meditation. I was in a moment, I guess, of meditation while I was traveling. And it just popped into my head, like literally, like as we were talking about muses earlier, or the idea of genius, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm just sitting there and it's like, Psi Games. And I'm like, whoa, who's that? Who's that? And nobody's, and I'm just like, whoa, like, what is that? Like, oh, and then details about what it could be, why it would be, so on and so forth. And I'm like, what is this? What's going on? I'm looking it up on my phone. Nobody's done anything like this. What? Is that crazy? That's what? And I started to say, well, it's too big. I can't do it. And then something else would happen. And I'd be like, whoa, okay, that relates back to the Psi Games. No, I'm too big. I can't do that. Something else would happen. And I think the final straw for me was, I was listening to George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell's Weaponize.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy from the DIA who wrote he's retired from the DIA, but he wrote Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. Have you read that book?
I have not.
That's a good book to read. And he was like, and Jeremy Corbell was like, hey, you're talking about NHIs and you're talking about all these abilities and these things, these interdimensional beings might have this and they can do this. Isn't that scary? Isn't that like overwhelming? And the guy said, no, I see no fear here. I see no danger here. He said, a matter of fact, and he's like, I can't say everything. He said, but I will say this. If humans could operate at their full potential, we wouldn't have a reason to be afraid. And I was like, Psi Games. I was like, this is why the Psi Games have to happen. We need to know what those potentials are. We need to know who's operating at one of those high levels. And that will inspire the next generation to move forward with getting better. It give people a purpose, a drive. It'll motivate. And this is in a fun way. And our culture sometimes you say the word competitive, especially in the conscious community, and they're like, oh, no, competitive. We got to love everybody. And I'm like, yeah, competitive is just a word. And the culture you build around that word can be destructive or it can be inspirational. And so the people who are involved in that culture of competitiveness around love and excitement and the celebration of psychic abilities is what allows us to really create a new paradigm, which allows people to feel okay exploring those and growing in those ways, right? And but if you just say it's all, it's got to be all flowers and rosy and stuff like that. Yeah, it does. I want it to be love and coherence. And by the virtue of us going inside to become better at those things versus outside doing stuff on the outside, going to the expo and listening to, such and such talk and so on and so forth. The fact of we're setting people up to want to get better, which means that you have to do more work on the inside of who you are. And all of the sages and everybody talks about that. NHIs and interdimensional beings sound very scary, like me playing basketball against Michael Jordan or going into the ring with Mike Tyson. I have no skills to be able to deal with those folks, like that's really scary. I don't know. Like, what are they doing? Are they scrambling my brain? But when I have mastered those elements that will allow me to walk in that arena, then it's a different feeling. It's a different feeling. And I only bring that up just as an easy way, not that this is about fighting. I'm just saying that when I have raised my vibration to a high level to where I see something or I communicate with something, I'm a lot less scared when I know who I truly am. When I'm not sure who I truly am and what I'm capable of and what I'm able to do, then I feel threatened that something else can do something that I feel like I can't do. So just like that guy said, if we knew who we truly were and we could explore who we truly are and we were celebrated for it, then we take the next step. And I think, I always say if, because I have my belief, obviously, right? But as a PSYOP guy, I say if NHIs are a real thing, if interdimensional beings are a real thing, then they're probably waiting for us to do the work, to gain the abilities that they say, oh, okay, these people aren't going to be afraid of me and try to kill me if I show up at their doorstep now. They will know. They will have that knowing. How do I know what this thing is? I just know. How do I know what I'm looking at? All of a sudden, I just know because I've been in this realm of doing the work to get me to have a different way of seeing the world to now I'm not threatened by that. Becomes a threat when it's like, just comes out of nowhere and I'm like, I don't know what you are. Well, kill it, like shoot that thing, But when I realize I can too walk through walls or I can too be in other places or I can too see things that I'm not supposed to, then it's like, oh, I can do that. That's, that's not really that scary, actually. Let's sit down and have a conversation now. You're pretty interesting. Where are you from? Exorc? Okay, let's go ahead. Let's have some coffee. Oh, you don't drink coffee? Like, what do you drink? That's a different conversation than, it would be if I don't have that. So my thoughts were, how do I bring this to a community? So I started going to these different events and I'm looking around and I'm looking at my teacher and all of the wonderful things that my teacher knows, Paul Smith and the Joe McMonacles and all these folks that I've trained with. And I'm like, whoa, not only are these people at these conferences older, even the people who are teaching this stuff are older and who've done this research over these years and years and gone through all of the ringer, like Dr. Diane Powell, where she was losing her medical license because she was like, dude, I'm doing great research. These guys didn't even read her book. They were just like, oh, you're talking about ESP? You're out of here, And then they read it and then they were like, oh, she's actually done some good research. But that was 10 years later, right? So all these people have this wisdom, this knowledge, and they, by the timeline of what we think, the human body can live are on their way out. Right. Mm-hmm. In a couple years, 20 years, hopefully, maybe more. I don't want to wish anything negative on anybody, but just the reality, harsh reality, or not harsh, but the reality of the world is that we have a certain amount of time in this physical realm. And then you have these kids that have these abilities, and they're all saying that these youth have these abilities, and then they lose it or they shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started looking into, well, why are they shutting it off? Because we don't have an arena or a place that supports that in our society. So it doesn't seem like you can like make a living or you can connect with other people in a grand way at that age. Other 15-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 7-year-olds are like, oh, I want to play Tekken or this video game, or I want to go play a sport, you know? And then you have this kid that can hear things and see things. And then parents are, back to my experience, you're just making that up. You're faking it. That's not real. Oh, you go to your little karate class. I don't teach karate, by the way, but most parents don't know. So they're like, you go to your little karate class, put your little blindfold on and play pretend for a little while. That's cool. That's cute. Yeah, go do that. But then at some point we got to have the real conversation that that's all BS and you can't do that at all. And the only way you're really going to make it in the world is to go out and get a job and do this hard factual thing and then lose that. And then quite often I was meeting people who now are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they have that reawakening.
Right.
And they say, man, when I was a kid, I could see through walls, bro. You don't even understand. I was like 7. I'm seeing people on the other side of this wall, and I'm trying to tell my mom, and they're just like, nah, bro.
Yeah.
It's not working. So now I shut it off.
There's no outlet.
Yeah, there's no outlet. I shut it off. And now here I am at 40, and I'm like, no, that was real. That was real. Now I'm back and I'm trying to learn it now. Man, what would the world be like if we had a 7-year-old who had mentorship and support and grew up with that knowledge and was getting guidance from the old ones going out, like we talked about earlier,
right?
About all the information they accumulated over a lifetime of research and study, helping them move to this next level, right?
Yeah, there's something really special about the way that that's structured too, because, you know, we have the James Randi and win $1 million if you can prove that you're a psychic, but you're already starting off with a negative.
Yes.
You're already starting off with a very skeptical sort of look at it, which is fine. You'd be a skeptic all you want, but in this particular scenario, it isn't encouraging at all when the audience is laughing at you and there's this whole, it's really built against you.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, you also have what now we're finding out. Well, we had CE5, which was an encouraging thing, but the goal there was to make contact with aliens and make these lights appear, which again is cool. And again, that's what we're seeing with the psionics team with Jake Barber. There's no place that really allows you to push forward this idea in a way that is just beneficial for us, and not to, you know, not simply to win money or not simply to call aliens or to talk to ghosts or whatever, but it's just human potential.
Yeah.
And it's encouraging. And you know what the beautiful part about this is that I know for a fact that no matter what happens, it was for a better cause. It was for the betterment of people. And what's the harm in that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the second you do that, you might be very, very surprised by the results.
Yes.
And then those results, you know, mark my words now, when those results get published and people go, wait, what's happening at this Psi Games thing?
Yeah.
These kids are doing what? These people are, they got all that right? Oh, they scored a perfect score on this. What? And then the evidence is there, the video is there, the data is there, because you're doing this in a way that is pretty much, you know, not in a perfect vacuum, because, you know, you don't want to do this in a lab because it's no fun.
Yeah.
But pretty near.
Yeah.
And you've even come to me to make sure that there's no way you can cheat on these things. And as a magician, you know, there's a lot of ways you can cheat a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've helped you really look at this, and you guys have been very vigilant on that. And so right off the gate, you have to get that out of the way. You have to be like, hey, we're taking care of that aspect of it, because we want real data. This isn't to support the idea that being psychic is real. This is, once we have the data, then we can jump to that conclusion.
Yeah. And you know, there's another thing that I've come across when I've had conversations, and that is well, why would you want to? I mean, what does it matter if I can see through walls and stuff? It's like, well, what does it matter if you can jog a mile or not?
Mm.
You know, it's like, why do we have to justify trying to fully embody who we really are as these multidimensional beings? I don't have to justify that. I'm just trying to help you get stronger and grow in your own personal life. Because if we have more people looking on the inside, and that part has been not only talked about by sages all across the world in different religions and
Yep.
backgrounds, that when you look inside and really do the internal work, you are better, not just you, but the people, everybody around you gets benefit from that. So we're motivating people through this very fun and community environment, and getting them to go home and practice. And the way we practice is not by doing physical things in the outside world. The way we practice is by working on our inner self. And so year after year, a 7 or 8 or a 9-year-old, and we have an adult division too. So it's not just for kids, it's for adults as well. They're going home and they're working on how to get better at remote viewing. And the way you get better at that is dive deeper into yourself.
More meditation.
Yes.
Yeah. Self-reflection.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just so cool. It's just so cool because, growing up, I was like, I want to be an X-Men. Just putting that out there.
I said I wanted to be a ninja at 9.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it was like, I want to be a spy or a superhero or a ninja or a magician, anything with like some hidden identity with like cool superpowers. Like that was, or gadgets, right? That's what we wanted. And I never really grew out of that. I don't think you did either.
No.
So for me, to hear about this stuff, this is like Xavier's school of like, you know what I mean? This is kind of cool. This is like, I get to see that in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I mean, that is way, way cool. And to be able to do that in a way that's fun.
Yes.
Encouraging. There's levity. It's, hey, let's cheer this person on who's doing this event. Or, oh, did you see so-and-so score with this and that? I mean, it's just such a cool concept to be able to do. It's not in a boring, weird lab. You know what I mean? And it's not in a place where people are going to scrutinize you. It's in a place where people are going to encourage you to try.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe that encouragement will even yield better results because we're all kind of wanting it to happen.
Well, it's research out that says that when you do things in play and fun, that you have better results. And there's a scientist who actually was doing psychic research who said, well, let's just do this from a fun perspective and have people have a good time and do it. And he found that the results were stronger.
Let's go.
In that environment than if it was like, hey, make sure, you do it this way, and this kind of, like you said, vacuum. And people were still getting decent results, but not as high as when it was from this fun perspective. And that's really where we are. And I had an individual approach me once. I was asking him his advice on this because he had walked this path with some research, and he was like, this country did that with the kids, and this country did that with the kids, and they were trying to do that, and they found that the kids just lose it after a while, and this, that, and other. And I said, well, first off, let me be very clear. This is not a military program. This is not about what we can do for our government. And when you're approaching it from that if we truly believe energy and intention really can drive how we do it with money. People say, oh, you want to manifest more money in your life, you have to have that intention. If you want to be a better lawyer, you have to have that intention. The attention you put around things really influences those things. So if this is like this government thing, you might have different experience than if this is a loving, fun, joyful thing. And if we put the proper intention, we will probably see that if we're talking about heart coherence, like the Heart Math Institute, they're finding that heart coherence and coming from the heart is actually allowing people to have great, better lives. It's influencing their health. It's influencing all these things. That ties back to a bunch of sages that said the same thing. And photos we see with prophets and sages and special people with hearts and halos glowing, this light. So if we truly believe that, then that's how we advance, is we surround things where people can get together and explore these with that type of love.
Yes.
with that type of growth or with that type of love and have that type of growth. And that's what that has not been done, not in this capacity, maybe in the small organization where we get 20 people at a time taking a class and they all work on that. But I'm saying, hey, all you organizations come together under one roof. Let's get some researchers in here who have been doing research. Let's get people who can do in here who've been doing. Let's get people who are in between both of those. They do research. And let's just have us all have this great event where we can talk and communicate and learn and mentor and grow and start different conversations. Because if I feel like you can do, if I'm a researcher and I've never met you or I just need you for the research, that's a horrible conversation for a lot of people.
Yep.
Like, hey, I heard you can do this thing.
It's exploitative.
I need you to come to the lab so I can test you. Versus, man, Chris, you did amazing. And I really want to get more data on this so that I can talk about like how it's done and things that, would you help me? And then, oh, well, let's go have, dinner tonight at the downstairs restaurant, and now we forge a real relationship, a friendship. And then we go into the lab and we do the work.
Yeah.
And now because we have a friendship, all of that other stuff hopefully disappears. And now we can really focus on, what can be done and how it can be done versus, I'm not really sure about this thing.
Yeah, what's in it for me?
Yeah, but I heard you can do it. So come to my lab and let's see if you can do it.
Yeah, well, we hook you up to these machines and then tase you to induce stress.
and that'll give you some money.
Yeah. But I mean, there is money here, which is nice too. Yeah. There are some prizes.
There are prizes.
Incentive is always fun. But I think more importantly, it's going to be the bragging rights and be like, hey, according to Psi Games, I'm the Psi Games champion. I'm like, that's cool. That's cool to say. Yeah. All right. We're going to, by the way, if you guys want to check it out, again, I left a link below to the Psi Games. You can check it out at PsiGamesInternational.com. And if you use the code that's below, you get 20% off your ticket. And again, I'll be there. I'll be speaking among so many other people.
And that's Psi as in PSI, because sometimes people think Psi as PSY or whatever. So it's PSIGamesInternational.com.
All right, we're going to get to some questions from the patrons, the interns. This is also YouTube members. And we're going to pull those up here in a second. I'm just going to go turn that camera on.
Okay.
Give me 1 sec. All right. It's kind of like a game show.
Okay.
There's a lot of really good questions. I've got like 5. I don't know if we'll have time to get through all. Maybe because we're going to do a Patreon episode after, or I keep saying Patreon, an intern extra episode after. And you guys can come watch that. Maybe we'll answer some more there. But here's the first one. How do you prepare your remote viewing sessions? Meditation, hemisync. What do you do? This is from Blackworks 1301.
I think that's a beautiful question. And I can't, it's either Bill Ray or Ingo Swann said you should be able to remote view in a foxhole, right? And this idea that it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, the goal is to try to get to a point where you can remote view in not ideal conditions. Do you say, I need to prepare my eyes so I can go out and see every day? Or do you just open your eyes and go for it? Now there are things to do to strengthen the eye muscles, right? So maybe you can, acquire things faster if you're shooting or something like that. But ultimately, how do you normalize it? So I will, if I do remote viewing and I do my cool down, they call it, it'll be some meditation and maybe a little bit of breath work, some Langana breath work, or even samana to kind of get me in a balanced state, right? And so let me explain that. So for those who know yoga, there are 3 different, energies that you can move to with breath work and stuff. And there's Langana, which is like a very relaxing state. And there's Samana, which is very balanced. And, and then there's Brahmana, which is very energized or energetic. And you can affect those energies based on how you breathe. And so, and then what your focus and intent of your practice is. And so, I would do like maybe calm myself with some Langana, or I'd go into a very balanced state with Samana. And then I would go into my remote viewing. But lately, like I said, since I had that experience where, oh man, I just got to get this homework in, like I just get it out of the way. Like, let me just sit down and do it. That has been something that I've had a lot of success with. And also but it takes me not being tied to the outcome.
Right.
Okay. So if I'm going in with the outcome that I want to be successful and everything has to be perfect, then that could actually, or in my experience, could hinder my ability to do well. But if I just say, hey, hands up, let's play, let's go, let's do this. Boom, 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 boom. That's when the knowing
experiment, basically.
Yeah. The knowing happens the most when I'm free to allow things to come to me the way I know they have before. And if they don't, okay, that's cool. But I'm not going to be down on myself because of it.
Great answer. And not the answer I expected, which is great. No, yeah. I was like, oh, for sure he's going to go into like Focus 12 or something. It's good. I like that answer. Okay. Flippity flip asking the real questions here.
Okay. Flippity flip. Let's flip it.
Get ready for this one. This is a great question.
That's all these colors up there.
What are ways to protect yourself from PSYOP or to detect them?
Good. That's a great question. So the thing that we talked about earlier was to first, I love this question from Usual Suspects, if you ever watched that.
Great movie.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making the world believe he didn't exist,
yep.
Right? And so you as an individual pull the wool over your own eyes to start with. And that is by saying, I know everything, or I know what my facts and the way I see the world is the way it is, versus saying the way I see the world could still be a little off, and the way I'm viewing this, because it's filtered through the way I see the world, and my brain does all these things to kind of make movement through life easier, where it has all these patterns and things. And I could be moving through attentional blindness or inattentional blindness. And, so I have to be first aware that I have those hooks, and that I could be hooked by emotion or something like that. So I have to step back and say, oh, is this my hook talking? Or
so recognize your own hooks.
Recognize your own hooks. That's the first. And then the other is I have to cut out the middle person, the middle media, right? If that a newspaper or my blog or vlog or Twitter or whatever, I have to get to you and have the conversation and say, well, what is it that you're thinking, versus me going through this process of saying, well, this piece of information has to be true because of what? Because we really don't know, right? You could go to a person that you think resonates with you and that they seem like they give good information, and then find out down the line that person's getting like $10 million a year from some corporation through a shell company, and then you're like, oh no.
Or USAID.
Yeah, basically, right?
Yeah.
To help influence, in this way, and maybe they're not as aware or focused on who they're dealing with as you thought they were, So those two things I think are really powerful.
Okay.
And the other is whenever you're watching something and you start feeling an emotion or you start landing on something, pause, and that's when you need to really think about it. So if something is influencing, you're watching a news broadcast and it's making you angry, that's a time for you to pause and step back and say, whoa, or making you like super empathetic or sympathetic.
Right.
Like, whoa, man, I feel so bad for that person, like maybe you should
so they're really playing off that cancer or whatever. Like, they'll hit you in the heartstrings sometimes. You're like, wait, there's actually, it's funny you say that. There was the Super Bowl. I was looking at some of the ads. Pfizer, they had like a really great ad, regardless of how you feel about giant pharmaceutical, conglomerate. But they had it was like all about this kid who was like fighting cancer, and like he was like a boxer, and he was like and he was cancer free, and the nurses were crying, and like he got back to his family and his hug. It was like and then at the end it's like Pfizer, and I'm like, you can't be mad at that, right? I'm in favor of this kid not having cancer, even though maybe I don't like Pfizer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they play on your emotions like
Yeah.
that, because at the end of the day, maybe we're not talking about that. Maybe we're talking about something else. So, it's good to recognize. That's a good point. Like if you're feeling emotional, like that means they've got you by the hooks. They've got you.
Yeah. I was watching a commercial because this is that time where you're looking for donations, right? So it was for like this pet, place that helps rescue pets. And the lady comes on there and she's like, and there's all these pets and they're all sad and they're chained up and they're this. And she's like, instead of just saying, hey, these pets need your help, she's like, these pets need your help. And I was like, and she's like she's crying on the other end of this thing, right? And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it's got the little dog and he looks so sad. And he's changed up
producers
too.
like, give us another one, but like more sad, please, this time. And
exactly.
she's like, okay, less sad than.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're watching that and you have an attachment to dogs and you hear this lady's voice, that sadness that they're relaying to you through her voice, that there's this compounding, what we call Psi act. I don't know if we got into it, but there's PSYOP, which tends to be more long-term, what you would do to influence. And then there's the actions that are being done. So Psi acts that are being done to create the PSYOP.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, the individual components.
Yeah. So the small things that you do to help you, everything like an advertisement, that advertisement would be a Psi act for the long-term goal of getting people to donate to that.
In magic, we call it subtleties. So if, if I was to say like, hey, check this out, I'm gonna make this disappear, and I go like this and it's gone. Eventually you'd figure out that I just threw it on my lap type deal.
Yeah.
But the subtlety to make it better would be this would already had to be on the table. It's weird that I put it down first and then picked it up again. That's insane.
Yeah.
Only an insane person would do something like that. So why is it on the table?
Yeah.
That's what we got to think about as a magician. Why is it on the table? Maybe I did this and I was writing over here, and now I'm thinking about something, and I'm like, you know what? Check this out, and now I do it. Right now there's a little bit of a justification. We call those subtleties.
Yeah.
There's actually something called the Ramsey subtlety, and I didn't invent this. It was John Ramsey is a coin magician. But like if you're palming something, to be able to hold something, this is a Ramsey subtlety. Even though I have this in palm, I want to hide it, so I'm going to hold something, or I'm going to gesture. Like this, and this is a subtlety.
Yeah.
And so these little things that really like create that illusion.
Yeah. It's funny that you should say that because, again, that's an PSYOP, that's setting the stage, right? But these little subtle things that you do to kind of get the mind to adjust to what you're trying to do over time is very important. And there's a book out that one of the books that we got was called Influence by Robert Cialdini, I believe his name is. And that was like a Bible, right? And reading that book. I
have that book. Actually.
And then he came out with a new book called Persuasion, where he did a lot of research and put a lot of research in this thing, where it talks about setting up the persuasion, all right, with persuasion, right? Or actually, I think it's Persuasion was that book. There's another book called Influence. And then so persuasion are the things you do to set up the persuasion. So put the cap on the table beforehand, and then come to it and then make it disappear, versus taking the cap off, drawing my attention to it, then making it disappear. It's like that why, which also is a thing we have. And a friend of mine who's special forces brought that up to me one day. We were talking about some overlap in the things we did. And he said, whatever I go to an area and I see somebody, just one of the ways you can spot somebody who might be tailing you or something like that is to ask yourself, why is that person there? Right. So if you see somebody standing on the corner, or you got 5 people out here standing on the corner, immediately in your mind go to why everybody is there. So nobody just stands on the corner normally. So if I see this person, why are they there? Oh, they're about to get the trash. Oh, he's waiting for his girlfriend to come out of the house. Oh, that guy's about to smoke a cigarette. Oh, this person, so your brain will go through the whys. And the minute the brain says, oh, there's a why that isn't being fulfilled, that's the red flag. And so then, of course, spies learn how to create good whys, right? Why would I be here? You know,
it's exactly like a magic trick. I'm telling you, we think about this stuff like more than anybody knows. Like it's really, you're getting into the really like the, when you jam with magicians, I go on a retreat every year with some of the best magicians in the world for like a week in Spain. We rent the house every year and we just go through like this stuff. We just talk shop, and you know, the justifications and the subtleties and the whys are very, very important. It's the difference between a good trick and a great illusion. Like, I mean, if you have somebody doing something and every single move that they do is justified, then there's no red flags popping off in your head subconsciously.
Yeah.
And it helps strengthen the magic. Because if I'm here and, you know, and I'm standing and I'm like this, you know, you're like, why is his hand like that?
Yeah.
Why? Right? So my hand has to be natural.
Yeah.
Okay, so my hand's natural, but why is my hand out here at all? My hand should be down here.
Yeah.
My hand should, I shouldn't be doing that, you know? And so there's all these, we answer the whys all the time. Why are you doing that? Why'd you just do that little move?
Yeah.
Why'd you pivot that way?
Yeah.
Why did you? And so very, very cool.
Yeah.
Again.
Keep them coming.
Yeah. All right. We got, oh, this is good. Not Quite Human. So he's on our, you know, he's part of our Discord, and he actually does weekly remote viewing sessions for the interns. So if you're ever interested in remote viewing and you're an intern, you can hit Not Quite Human up, and he's learning. He knows nothing about it. He's a tasker. And so he's got a lot of questions. If ever, by the way, if you ever have time to hop on our Discord for like a Q&A, I know this guy would be very thankful. He'd have a million questions for you.
Let's do it. Let's set that up.
Here's his question. It's a pretty good question. He had like 4 questions. He was so excited. What are your tips for remote viewing taskers?
That's an interesting one because I'm not a tasker per se.
Do you know any tips that you might be able to give him?
If you're tasking, make sure that you are. So one of the things they figured out, and this again is my perspective, but one of the things they figured out in the past, that if you don't give specific times, you know, like if you don't say, hey, we need for your monitor to give you this number, but we want to task it for this specific timeline, then just like Joe McMonagle, who you interviewed, you can end up 1,000 years in the future or 1,000 years in the past. And if I'm not looking at that timeline, then I could be I can be giving you information that is correct, but it's at the wrong time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for you, you're like, it's wrong, but it actually is right, but it's just at a different time, because sometimes the remote viewer's mind will jump at the most interesting thing that happened in that place.
Right. The most entropy or the most yep.
So if you want to know what's happening there now, then you should say to the monitor, hey, when you give this information, make sure that you ask like, what's happening there right now? Or what's going to be happening? What happened on the moon 1 million years ago? But you don't say the moon, obviously, but you're saying, here's the coordinate or whatever, 7, 5, 6, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, tell me what happened there at that coordinate 1 million years ago, you know? And then then the remote viewer will be like, oh, okay, got it. Let me go. And then, but, you know, so that would be one aspect of it, is that when you're tasking that person. The other thing that I would say too is know who your remote viewers are and what they're good at. So some remote viewers are good at giving you colors and shapes, and some remote viewers are good at giving you like really quality like drawings and ideograms. Like me, all my drawings look like chicken scratch, you know, so I'm not the guy you need sketches from, you know, you need to get somebody to discern just the sketches. So it's a whole nother step if you want that. But I'm the guy that, you know, you might get some good descriptors from, you know, and so, or I do really well on colors, but I don't do good on shapes, you know? And so know who you're dealing with, just like you would in any other type of, operational environment, even in PSYOP. You know, some people were really good at coming up with radio ads or things that should be on the radio. Some people were more visual, so they were better at coming up with things that might be on the television, you know. So, and then you should be tasked based on your strength, not your weakness.
Okay. Great. Great answers. I'm sure he'll appreciate that, and I'm sure. I mean, anything. He seems very passionate about this remote viewing stuff, which is really cool to see. All right, we have Tess here. This is a great question. I like this question a lot. And after that, we'll hop into the extra. Tess asks, what is the most unusual / surprising way you have utilized your expertise?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. That's a great question. Because I don't have a timeline. She was supposed to give me a timeline. At what point?
Well, which one stands out?
So I think, and I guess it depends on if it's my expertise as a ninjutsu practitioner or as a PSYOP.
Or as survival. We didn't even get into
survival experience. Yeah. I think those things are so many different realms.
So let's pick one.
Yeah.
Let's pick, you know what? Let's go for survival. Because most people, we didn't talk about that at all, but you're like a survival expert. You were on Naked and Afraid, which is an insane concept for a show, by the way. They just drop you off naked somewhere and they're like, good luck.
I was on First Man Out in China, and the Tibetan Plateau in China, and Race to Survive Alaska. I was in the wilderness and wilds of Alaska. So, yeah, it's been quite a bit of things.
Okay, so bearing that in mind.
I think that's a great, and I have an answer
now
that you say it. So when it comes to survival, one of the ways that I tend to look at things a little more uniquely is I use the ninja elemental structure. And that helps me work within nature, with nature, and not against nature. So I remember watching a show once, I'm not going to say what, but I remember watching a person and they were like, I'm going to make nature my bitch, like they're like all like into it. And for me, that's not it. So the ninja were masters at being able to fit in, right? Our power as modern day ninja, but the power as past ninja was not to force my will onto you, but how do I allow you to create your own destruction? And that's really challenging for people because we like to resist and do stuff, right? So now you're telling me, no, I'm letting you do stuff. And that in doing that, it creates the openings for me to win, right?
Right.
Just like probably, with magic, you're finding out where their opening is, that gap, so you can get in there and
the offbeats.
And so when I'm in the wild, using this ninja mentality of the elements means that I understand how the elements interplay with each other. So, and I use that for PSYOP too. And that was not taught to me at the schoolhouse. This was taught to me by ninjutsu. And that made me unique again, is that we say that Earth interacts, the way Earth interplays with, let's say, water. So if I have a water mentality, let me take it from the human then to the nature. If I have a water mentality, a person who is scientific, who likes to think through things, who's very reflective, so on and so forth, and I want to control that, then I would look at how Earth controls water in nature. Oh, well, you can have troughs, you can have a waterway or a stream, and so you form the dam, you form these things to help you guide the water.
Whoa.
Right?
That's awesome.
So then if I want to get a water mindset person, then I have to find solid means of helping guide them. And because they're scientific and they like to analyze, I have to set up things for their analyzation, their analytical mind, to then want to move in that direction, right? Now, let's say you're vice versa. Earth, super strong, stagnant, I'm there, right? Well, how does water deal with Earth? Well, it erodes it over time. So now I have to use my analytical mind to
wear it down.
How do I wear this down? And so if it's a relationship, maybe I don't want to wear down my partner, but maybe I keep making these suggestions and showing that partner like how it would be better if we did it this way because of this. And
it actually weakens without water too.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, dude, this is so cool.
Right? So then
I love this.
So then when I'm in nature and I say, oh man, I see the sky. It's about to rain on me, and it's going to be super cold tonight, and it's going to do all this stuff. Okay, I have two means of dealing with this. Well, I would use fire, but if it's going to rain, the rain might put out the fire. So I need a barrier against the water. So I'm going to make a shelter. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the shelter is going to be able to keep the water out. But I need to keep my heat in. So I'm going to make insulation. So I'm going to use earth to help me keep the heat in, as though I would a fire ring around a fire pit, or like we would make a chimney to reflect the heat back into the thing. So I need to keep that contained. So how do I do that? Oh, I'm going to put insulation in here by putting debris on it. And I'm going to use earth that way. So when I see how the elements interact and how they can stop or progress or move one another, then I can now start thinking scientifically about what I need in that particular way and interplaying with the environment as the environment knows how to interplay with itself.
So good, dude. That's so good. It's so much food for thought for me. Like, because, especially when you're like, oh, a water person, and that's their type. And then you can use the other elements. I'm like, oh my God, this is so practical.
Yeah.
So practical.
I'm going to add one thing to that because I think you'll like it. So then we see normally we'll have the elements signed up in a row, right? And so it's linear, but it really isn't. It's not even circular. It's more spherical, right? So the elements and how they play are moving around each other in a sphere-like thing, and they transition into one another. So water transitions into fire in order for water to be effective in this interplay. And so when we look at it from personality-wise, we say, well, water is scientific, analytical. But as we were saying earlier, what's information in science and analytics without action? And fire is action. So I've transitioned from this stage of fluidity and looking at things from different angles to, okay, now it's time to make something happen and bring it out in the world. Okay, what do I need for that? Oh, I need fire. And then I say, oh, okay, well, now I have this action, but I only have but so much energy, and I'm losing that. I need more. I need more than just my mind. So then I call in wind, which is going to help feed this flame. Yeah. Right. But if I call in too much wind with no fuel, it'll burn me out. So I need to get some earth people in here who like stability to help me have a good foundation while I continue to move with passion to bring this thing into existence, and use the wind people to help feed me, to help me grow that to the next level.
Beautiful.
And so there's this interplay between them. And we all have one or two elements that we kind of live in, and then we branch out into the other ones as we have engagements and as we find new ways. Because, I'm normally a wind person, but I have been an earth. I have had to operate from earth because I need stability at times. I need to know that my business is going to be open tomorrow and things need to happen. And so that means I just can't always be out in the world doing what I want and creating. I have to have some solidity. So that interplay helps me look at everything. I look at in relationships with people, but I also look at my relationship with the world in that same way. And so that from my expertise, that is one of the most unique ways that I found to be able to be successful in the wilderness, is not by trying to force my humanism on nature, but recognize the nature within my nature.
Wow. Beautifully said. That is amazing. I think we're going to end that there. I don't think there's a better way to end that. Dude, that's so poetic. Hakim Isler, man, you are such an inspiration. You're so great. I love your magic. I love your energy. I wish you great success with this project. I know it will be a success in many ways. And if you guys want to check out what Hakim does, I'll leave some links below. You guys can check those out. And if you want to join us, we're going to keep this conversation going, take a quick little break, go to the bathroom here. But we're going to go in overtime into the intern-only episode. So if you guys want to watch that, click the join button or go to patreon.com/Area 52 Investigations. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks, Hakim.
You're welcome. Thank you.